Should I do, oh my gosh, should I do manual focus? Okay, you know what? I've been finagling way too long with the lighting and with the with the focus and with the aperture and with everything. Yeah, so you see like my ring light over here. I've been doing a lot of research on lighting. I changed the light bulb up there. We'll see how this goes. I just want to get this over with. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Grace, and today we are going to be talking about Blood of Hercules by Jasmine Moss. This was recommended to me by my friend Cloud. Cloud, if you're watching this while washing your dishes, just know that this is all because of you. Since they know I'm a booktuber, they sent me a link to this book, and ever since I clicked on that link, my life has been irrevocably changed for the rest of my life. There was a time before this book, and now this is the time after, and we're all just living in it. For those of you who don't know and aren't on Book Talk like me, this is a dark romance book based around Greek mythology. And I knew as soon as I read the synopsis on the Goodreads page Cloud sent me, I couldn't not read this book. Just to give a little background before we start getting into the thick of it. This was originally an Amazon Kindle self-published book by Jasmine Moss herself until it garnered a lot of attention and was subsequently picked up by Canary Street Press, which is an imprint of Harlequin, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, and it was acquired in a 7-figure book deal. Wow. Yeah, so you know what? Let's just get started with the synopsis. Oh god, okay. I'm just a girl, and as it turns out, I'm Hercules. Oh, I'm just a girl. I couldn't stop thinking about that song. Okay, continue. I'm struggling to survive in a Titan-infested world where Spartans, immortals from 12 royal families who have godlike powers and obscene wealth, rule over all. A shy, stammering foster child with nothing, I keep my head down, cover my scars, and focus on excelling in school. At least, I try to. Then it happens. My blood test reveals I'm part of the powerful elite. I'm one of them, a Spartan. Forced to attend the Spartan War Academy, I undergo the most harrowing test of all time to see if I have what it takes to be an immortal. There's just a few problems. Achilles and Patro are my scary mentors. Charon, the ferryman of death, and Augustus, the son of war, are my terrifying professors. Also, I'm pretty sure either someone's stalking me everywhere I go or my sanity's slipping. I have a bad feeling both are true. I'm surrounded by villains, and they're smothering me with their hate, obsession, and dark possessiveness. Too bad for them. They have no clue just who they're messing with. I'm like, is this a YA novel? I'm already thrown for a loop here. It's set in the first person. We don't know the main character's name. Spoiler alert, her name is Alexis. She's a shy, stammering foster child, but then at the end, they just don't have no clue who they're messing with. Or they just don't know have. Anyway, double negatives, triple negatives. There's just so much to parse here, and I definitely will go over most of these points when we actually dive into the book itself. But just one thing I want to touch upon right now is Patro, Achilles and Patro. So I don't think I talked about how much I really like Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Perhaps it's a bit of a purist in me or a bit of an OTP shipper in me who's like, don't touch them. They've been around for 1 second, I'm trying to do math. The Iliad was written in 700s BC, so however long it's been, they've been the OTP. So that I was incredibly baffled and bewildered when Patroclus's name is shortened to Patro. So I did a little research. Patroclus means in Greek, glory of the father. Patro, father, kleos, glory. So nicknaming him just Patro means just calling him father, which is incredibly weird. That's not even the weirdest thing in this book. Already, it reads incredibly juvenile from the first person perspective, and this I'm just a girl, I have to go to War Academy, and the I'm pretty sure, or, you know, like anachronistic slang such as that. So that's just what I thought about. Those were my first impressions when I started reading this. So finally, when I had this in my hands, I am going to admit it took me way too long to even get into the story proper because of the first couple of pages before the story starts. So let's break into this, shall we? And then we open up to this actually really gorgeous inner cover art here. I'll post it up. The artist's name, I will also post. It's Kitsune something. And I'm just glad it's not AI art. In the inner cover here, everyone is talking about Blood of Hercules, hashtag book talk praise. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to get out of here. Maybe it's just because I'm at a weird age where I never really got into book talk. But you know, we have like, maybe these are people with lots of followers or book talk influencers, I don't know. We have Brittany, we have Zoe, we have Abigail, we have Sam and Mari, and I'm a little bit like, okay, you guys liked it. That's good for you. I don't know who you are. So we get to the content warnings. Okay, so I'm going to read out the content warnings to you. And yes, content warnings for the book, and also a good opportunity for content warnings for you, the viewer, if you are in any way related to Jasmine Moss, a fan of hers, friend or family. This review is for entertainment, criticism, and commentary purposes only, and not recommended for the author or author affiliates. I'm going to rag on this story pretty hard. So if this isn't your jam, then, you know, content warning for that. But content warnings for this book itself. This is a story of dark romance and darker obsession. Please note that it contains themes that may be triggering for some readers. There's violence, depictions of murder, stalking, suicidal thoughts, bullying, explicit language, and betrayal. For a full list, see the author's website, jasminemossbooks.com. It's a slow burn, but there are open door scenes. Please take care of yourself. Sometimes becoming a hero hurts, a lot. Beware. All right, content warnings. Okay, I knew that this was a dark romance. I have a pretty strong stomach for a lot of things. So then we get to the dedication. And this is where I'm my patience was already tested. Because look, here's the thing about me and like these dark romance TikTok famous books. There's a whole lot of them out there, like those mafia books and like that one with the girl named Adeline and the one where Captain Hook and Wendy get it on or something like that. Look, I only have so much time and energy on this beautiful green earth of ours. I'm just not interested in those things. Like, I know what I like. So maybe this is a matter of taste, but also this is just generally not a good book. But we'll just start with the dedication. And look, again, as I said earlier, I warned you that I'm going to nag pretty hard on this. I got a whiteboard for this because what we're about to do is requiring of a whiteboard. The dedication. This book is dedicated to all the girls who like morally gray fictional men and who screamed out loud the first time they read, "Who did this to you?" This one's for you. All right, so this is my first perhaps controversial opinion. I think we need to retire the term morally gray because I don't think we deserve it anymore. Here's the thing that I've come to learn, and especially after the election, when I saw that like TikTok screenshot of like the girls who were like, yeah, we voted for Trump because we like morally gray men. Look, this is one of those cases where I really want to be the one to say that, hey, look, we need to actually consider what we're reading because it is influencing reality, okay? And I am going to talk about Jesus Christ. You bet you didn't see that one coming, did you? I think we need to retire the term morally gray because I don't think we deserve it anymore. I don't think we do. So the thing about morally gray is that there is no definitive definition of what counts as morally gray or not because it's subjective. It is the gray area between good morals and bad morals. So personally, I think we should start using the D&D alignment chart, but other than that, the thing about morally gray is that it's incredibly subjective. For example, the way that I see it, like when it comes to morals, it's really about like actions and goals. What are your means or your character's means and to what end? For example, I feel like that my personally quintessential morally gray character is Batman. Batman's goals is to wipe out the villains of Gotham. You could say that is morally good. However, he does it so outside of the law. And he may sometimes take on incredibly shady practices to do so, like working from the shadows. So therefore, you could say that's more morally gray. And you can also think of the other gray areas of like his morality spectrum where he refuses to kill. And one could argue for, hey, it would be a greater good to take these villains out of their misery. That's his morals. That is the gray spectrum of his morals. You also have a complete different personality in Deadpool, where he is just balls to the wall, like hedonistic, no thought, head empty, like action man. His actions are also can be quite morally reprehensible, killing indiscriminately. However, his goals could be seen as quite noble out of context, you know, fighting the villains, joining the Avengers, working with Spider-Man. But those personalities are incredibly different. Something that I've come to recently realize, though, is that when some writers say that their characters are morally gray, I've come to realize that just because you're calling your character morally gray doesn't mean they have a personality. And I think we'll get to that later because these characters, they're just atrocious. When it comes to things like these dark romances, I'm not saying that like these authors can't explore kink. The problem is that some of these authors are just bad writers. And I think we've been seeing a lot more of the line between consenting kink and just straight up abuse. That line is just getting blurred and blurred and blurred, or more like people seem to just be sailing over consented kink and then landing in straight up abuse and then being like, wow, I've landed in kink. And it's like, no, you've landed in straight up abuse here. It could be said if the story actually wanted to explore abuse in characters and between characters, but I can tell you right now that this book isn't doing it. And here's the thing, I'm talking so much and we're only on the dedication. I already have my expectations set in a certain degree and I am not looking forward to it. Again, perhaps this isn't for me, but also I think I need to read this so that I can talk about it and maybe understand why this is popular. Because when I saw that TikTok screenshot of people voting for Trump because they like morally gray men, I'm a little bit like, we've lost the sauce, we've lost the plot, we've lost the pasta, we've lost the plate, we've lost everything here. Like, I think we need to remember why there is such thing as good literature. I'm being really harsh, but this is how I feel about it. So yeah, I think morally gray is just a band-aid to cover up the fact that some male characters don't have a personality. Even female characters too. So next, this is the part of the book that sent me into a tizzy for at least 24 hours straight, and that is the family tree, or the 12 houses of Sparta. It is divided into Olympian houses and Chthonic houses. And here's the part where I reveal the secret goal of this video is not to do a Blood of Hercules review. Oh my god. It's Grace's Myth Fun Facts Corner. Yay! Everyone say yay! Grace is about to launch you with a bunch of cold, hard Greco-Roman mythology facts. Because Grace went into a Wikipedia rabbit hole for like a week straight for this book. In this book, there are 12 houses of Sparta. Okay, because the way that I'm writing, I can't actually see what I'm writing. This is a very awkward way to write, so just deal with it for me. And there are two factions, the Olympian houses and the Chthonic houses. So when you see Olympian, I'm going to hopefully guess that some of you guys have a basic knowledge of Greek mythology. So Olympian, you think, duh, Zeus, Hera, Poseidon. Yes, those are the Olympians. There are 12 Olympians in Greek mythology. However, in this world, there are only 8 Olympian houses. The Chthonic houses is where I lost my mind for a while, because in this world, there are only 4 Chthonic houses, and the first one is what made me lose my mind. The first Chthonic house on the top of this family tree is Artemis. And then I was like, excuse me, Chthonic, goddess Artemis? Does not compute. Let's roll back. What does Chthonic mean? So Chthonic in Greek is used to describe earth and the soil and the darkness and the underworld, and is used as a descriptor for certain deities aligned with those aspects. So of course, we have Hades and Persephone, king and queen of the underworld. They are considered Chthonic gods. You can even consider Demeter a Chthonic goddess because of her status as an agricultural goddess. She is associated with the tilling of the earth. So Chthonic doesn't necessarily mean evil. And there has been scholarly debate as to whether or not Chthonic even matters as a significant category for deities, because under certain epithets, any god could be stretched to be considered a Chthonic deity. For example, Zeus, under certain epithets, even though he is commonly considered a sky god, could be considered a Chthonic god because under certain epithets, he is more closely related to the earth. So epithets, real quick, let's get in on that. So an epithet is a byname. So we have Alexander the Great, we have Vladislav the Poker, we have Jesus Christ. Those descriptive words are the epithets. So with Greek deities, they have multiple aspects that they're associated with. So for example, we have Athena, who is the goddess of war, but she is also the goddess of wisdom, the goddess of crafts, and her most common epithet is Pallas Athena, or Athena Pallas, and that is Athena the protector. We also have a common epithet with Apollo, and he is the god of archery, the god of music and arts. You have epithets, I think this is how you spell it, I forgot how to pronounce this, Enes. That means leader of the muses, because he's associated with the arts and with music. He is often associated with the 12 muses. But he is also more commonly worshipped as Apollo Phobos. Anyway, that means Apollo the Bright. That is the sun god Apollo that was most commonly worshipped in Greece and then Roman times. And a fun fact about Artemis, really quick before I start roasting the choice to make her a chthonic god. There was a cult in Sparta for Artemis Orthia. Artemis the Upright. And what's interesting about this cult is that they had a sanctuary that there is still archaeological evidence for. It said that there was a coming of age ritual for young men in this cult where, it's so funny, I still laugh when I think about it, where they would go after the cheese that had been placed on the altar, and while trying to get the cheese they would be whipped on all sides by the adults in order to train them to be soldiers. And apparently this spectacle had become so popular, I guess, that they had to build an amphitheater for. Just imagine all of these young men trying to race each other for the cheese and they get whipped on all sides. So like the epithets could have been used and we could have had like cheese ritual Artemis, but alas, we do not. All right, so now you know what chthonic is and now you know what epithets are. And this will come up in my discussion later. Because not only is Artemis listed as a chthonic goddess here, she is also paired up with Erebus, the god of darkness. He's, I think, a primordial god. I actually didn't do a lot of research on Erebus, sorry, because he's one of those gods that we just don't know a lot about. But she is paired up with Erebus too, and it's said that she gives birth. Now, you don't see her in the book, I will say that now, but she is paired up with Erebus to give birth to Charon. I did not spell this very well. And so I just went into this furious wiki rabbit hole for a few days regarding this, because in popular culture as we know her now, she is a moon goddess, a virgin by choice who is the goddess of the wilds, goddess of the hunt. She is teamed up with her band of lady hunters who are all immortal, and if any man looks at her wrong, she smites them. And so seeing this, I'm like, this is a disrespect to Artemis, honestly. Look, and like we can say a lot about using mythology in fictional narratives. But you know, the way that I see it, and this is a personal opinion, and I think it's been discussed a little bit online, these mythologies was once a religion upheld and respected by so many people, even if those people lived thousands of years ago. I feel like with this is perhaps going to be a bit bold of me to say, I think a grave disrespect to Artemis and the people who like Artemis, and even a common layman's knowledge of Greek mythology, is when there is such a huge change like this, it is a huge thing to ask for a reader to swallow, basically. If there were changes that were more parallel or a little bit more easier to navigate rather than this, it would have been nicer for the reader and for the story, but alas, we have this. And I'm gonna keep going with this because there's actually a lot to say that I researched, and I did do a lot of research, so I'm not about to let it go to waste. So for the swankier Greek myth nerds out there, you're gonna say, Grace, what about her other aspects? And you're right. Artemis does have an aspect as a goddess of childbirth. Now, this is likely related to her origin story because she and her brother Apollo are children of Zeus by a woman who was not his wife. Their mother Leto was cursed by Hera to basically be unable to give birth. In some versions of the story, she kept a goddess of childbirth away from her. In other parts of the story, she cursed her so that she could not give birth on land that was tethered by the earth. But eventually Leto found the island of Delos, where she was able to find the loophole in the curse and give birth to Artemis and her brother Apollo. In some versions of the story, Artemis, baby Artemis is born first, and then she goes right around to help her mother deliver her brother Apollo. So that was really funny. But you know, I think it's not a wild thing to say that a virgin goddess and a childbirth goddess could exist at the same time, because there's more to childbirth and childcare than giving birth to the kid yourself. And that led me down a further rabbit hole with Artemis, and then with her Roman counterpart Diana. And that's where it gets really interesting. I want to give huge props to Overly Sarcastic Productions. I think I've mentioned them before. Thanks to their videos on mythology, I'm able to talk about this at all. So Diana is actually a very interesting case. When those pesky Romans started coming around, they syncretized their gods with the Greek gods, essentially synchronizing them as the same god. Zeus became Jupiter, Poseidon became Neptune, etc., etc. Not Apollo though. Apollo was pretty much lifted wholesale. So along the way, Artemis became syncretized with their local hunting goddess named Diana. Here's another interesting fact, is that while we do consider Artemis to be a lunar goddess in popular culture today, she wasn't always so in ancient Greek times, because they already had Selene, their goddess of the moon. However, again, when Diana became syncretized with Artemis, Selene got wrapped up in there because Apollo became the sun first. So while they were worshiping Apollo as the sun, his sister Artemis naturally became the goddess of the moon under the name Diana. Because, you know, it just made sense to those pesky Romans. And in that research, I discovered that Diana was often worshipped as a triple goddess as Diana Trivia. There's the R. As Diana Trivia. The concept of triple goddesses is something I could go on another deep dive into, but basically it's one goddess with three aspects, or three goddesses closely aligned with each other. Diana Trivia was commonly worshipped in Rome alongside Selene or Luna and Hecate, an underworld goddess of magic. So together, the three of them became one triple goddess, Diana Trivia, where Diana is the aspect of the hunt, Selene is the aspect of the moon, and Hecate was the aspect of magic and the underworld. So all this to say is that you could stretch this all the way back to Artemis, but that is a long stretch, and that's only because the Romans did it. And this is supposed to be a book about Greek mythology, but to be honest, I don't know how much of this is like a big thought out thing or just a matter of aesthetic preference, but there is a lot of Greek and Roman blendings in this story. You will see in the next page after this, but they speak in Latin. One of the characters' names is Augustus. Even with the title here, Blood of Hercules. Hercules, this is the Roman spelling of Hercules. The Greek spelling is Heracles. Heracles means glory of Hera, which is ironic because Hercules or Heracles was a demigod whose father was Zeus and his mother was cursed, I think, or he was cursed. There was like the thing with the snakes, but he's a super strong demigod. So when he was born, like his mother was like, "Hey, Hera, please don't look. I named him after you. Glory to Hera. Please don't kill me." Either he was named Hera so he can be spared from her wrath, or it was just meant to be ironic. There really is no way to say it. But yeah, no, there's like a lot of Roman aspects in here, and I personally feel like if they changed the house names to the Roman spelling, the Roman counterparts, I think nothing would change. I even went on a short wiki hole on the design of the armor here on the cover. I thought that, the plume helmet was an exclusively Roman thing. I did learn that Greek hoplite armor did have the plume. And look, you can say, well, Grace, like Romans took so much inspiration from Greece that, yeah, no, that's right. But like Percy Jackson had the Greeks aspect and the Rome aspects pretty neatly categorized and put in their space, so like to this it just feels like you wanted the Roman and the Greek but not necessarily cohesive. And look, maybe there is like some parts in my second skimming through that I'm like, okay, maybe the Greek Roman thing is on purpose, but the focus here is not on the world building, unfortunately. We'll get to that when we get there. I'm gonna try and wrap this up real quick, but I do want to talk about the other chthonic houses, which are Aries. Now, again, Aries is not commonly considered a chthonic god, but you can make the stretch that his connection with war connects him with death, connects him with the underworld. That wasn't hard to buy, you know, like that was something I could accept. Hades is like, duh, Hades, king of the underworld. And then we have Aphrodite. Now, Aphrodite is an interesting case, and I did accept her a little bit easier as a chthonic deity rather than Artemis because, it's time for more fun fact, myth corner with Grace. So Aphrodite, her origin story, of course she has multiple origin stories because this is mythology. Perhaps the more famous origin story is that when the Titan Kronos slew his father Uranus's castrated balls fell into the sea at Cythera, at the island of Cythera, and Aphrodite was born fully formed from the sea foam, as seen in Botticelli's Venus. Or the other origin story is that she is the daughter of Zeus and the Titan Dione. Yeah. Those are her mythological origin stories. Her archaeological / historical origin story is that she is the Mesopotamian goddess Ishtar. And along the way, Ishtar became the Phoenician goddess Astarte. And then along trade routes, she became Aphrodite in Greece, where she first appeared in the island of Cythera, just like in her origin story from being born out of sea foam and balls. The thing about Ishtar and Astarte is that they're goddesses of love and war, and those aspects continued from Cythera into Sparta, where she became Aphrodite Aurea, a goddess of love and war. And of course, Aphrodite Aurea is a hit in Sparta. They love their war. But Aphrodite Aurea wasn't very popular with the rest of Greece proper, so eventually she lost her warlike aspects and became more solely a goddess of love, in time for her to be written in the Iliad as a non-battle goddess. And we could go on to her other epithets like Aphrodite Urania and Aphrodite Pandemos, but we don't have time for that now. I had to change my battery once already, and I do not want to torture my poor camera. So that, all that to say is that this is the explanation of the house family trees here. None of that really matters. And again, I want to reiterate that even despite all this research into justifying that perhaps, yes, these gods can be considered chthonic gods, at the end of the day, I'm still incredibly mad about Artemis / Diana, because those goddesses are considered virgin goddesses. And I guess maybe it's just me as like someone who's on the demi-A spectrum. I'm a little bit like, perhaps like, I don't want to say precious of that, but like someone who really sees that part of myself in those deities. And look, maybe there's something to be said for the later books because this is projected to be a trilogy and we don't actually see Artemis, but I'm pretty sure there's like a high chance that she actually gave birth. And look, here's the thing. I was feeling very nitpicky about whether or not this was Nyx erasure. Nyx is a primordial goddess of darkness and the night, and she actually is known to have children with Erebus, and she is the mother of this god of the sky, the god of the day, the god of death, Thanatos, the god of sleep, Hypnos, the god of destruction, the god of doom, the goddess of revenge. This is Nyx erasure. She is, of course, the perfect chthonic goddess for this. Someone named Nyx shows up in this story. She's an invisible snake, an ancient race called echidnas. Yeah, Nyx is downgraded from a primordial goddess to an invisible snake. We'll talk about Nyx later in the story proper because that's this book's version of Nyx that is quite unnecessary as a character. So, moving on. So the epigraph is in Latin, and that also made me not want to read this book because why is the Greek mythology book talking in Latin? Fides est periculosa ludum. Truth is a dangerous game. She didn't know who was hunting her until it was too late. Alright, so into the story proper. So the first chapter is an omniscient chapter by fate. In Greek mythology there would be the 3 fates, but it seems that in this world there is just one for now, and she's wearing a toga, and I was again just like, hey, I thought I was here for the Greek mythology. Not one chiton in this whole place. So basically this first prologue chapter is this woman who is from the title of Fate, or The Fate. She smokes that good smoke and she gets a prophecy. The lost one shall change what is before, chained to death's soldiers becoming evermore, or titans will inherit the earth and there will be nothing but war. Yeah, I can already tell that Death Soldiers is probably like the 4 guys here. Anyway, I totally forgot that this prophecy was a thing from the entirety of this book. After her prophecy trip, the Fate Lady, described with violet eyes and white hair, goes to where the head of houses are assembling the Olympians, and she's like, we're going to pass this marriage law. The marriage law states that Spartans must be married by 26. And Zeus is like, 26 is a bit too young to be hitched for all of immortality, right? And this lady's like, are you doubting me and my powers, boy? And he's like, no. We know right away that this Lady Fate is somebody not to be messed with. So she gets the marriage law signed and passed. And she also says that Augustus and Charon will be made professors. And that is basically the end of the first prologue. The second prologue is a world building chapter. Now this is a really interesting bit. Based on what I know now from reading this whole book, I want to touch upon this world building chapter a bit. And haha, you know I love ragging on world building. So in this world, it seems that Spartans are not gods. So according to the world building chapter, at the beginning of time, or the earliest being, were Spartans, and they were immortal beings with superpowers. And there were also the creatures. We later learned that creatures basically compose of like the Greek monsters that we know, but really they don't really matter because there is a differentiation between creatures and animals, I think. The animals will come later. It's kind of not very clear, but creatures, the only creature that we see for sure are sirens, and we'll get to the sirens later. But basically, Spartans and creatures I don't think are immortal. Spartans and creatures can have kids with each other. That's brought up later. And then, at some point in time, humans came along. They worshipped these immortal Spartans like gods. So upon reading it the second time, because, you know, knowing what I know now, it seems that like even though the Spartans are not gods, they were worshipped like gods. And then the partnership of Spartans and humans led to the creation of the Roman Empire. Yeah, there's really no other details besides the Roman Empire. Like, what about the Roman Republic? What about, you know, the senators? Like, who was running the place? Like, were human emperors running the place, or were Spartan emperors running the place? I don't know. It's just said they created the Roman Empire, and then at some point the humans turned against the Spartans because at some point they realized that, well, they are still immortal, but their weakness is that they can be sliced up, diced up, and scattered into a bajillion pieces, or they do have extreme limits, such as reaching the point of hunger, reaching the point of thirst, of exhaustion, that they can fall into a coma. They're not dead. They don't die, but they can fall into a coma. Somehow, for some reason, humans decided to turn against the Spartans. And the Spartans were like, you don't deserve us. And they turned right around, fled into the Dolomite Mountains in northern Italy, and took out the Library of Alexandria along the way. So pause here, because here are my thoughts, okay? Knowing what I know now about the story, and we'll get into the story. They don't say it, but it would be cool if the humans turned against the Spartans because of Jesus. And hear me out. And this was a huge annoyance for me throughout the entire book, is that Christianity exists in this universe. Christianity, Catholicism, like I had a running list of like all the Judeo-Christian terms that were said and used in this book. Multiple times Alexis refers to this guy named Father John, and he's espousing all of the usual sinners and burning in hell lectures. That character doesn't matter. With this alternate history, Christianity exists in here somewhere. So hear me out. And this would have been cool, okay? This is not talked about in the book at all. There's no explanation as to how Christianity and this alternate history exist at the same time. This is just me extrapolating. Again, this is not in the story. The fall of the Roman Empire wasn't really like a huge crash and burn. It was more like a slow and steady decline over a couple of decades. But generally, it's the late 300s AD that starts the decline of the Roman Empire. The Library of Alexandria, although it's a myth that the Library of Alexandria burned down, please watch Casbra's video on it. I watched it recently. Let's just say, for the sake of this world building, that the Spartans did take out the Library of Alexandria on their way out. And according to this universe, the burning of the Library of Alexandria is the reason why humans lost their knowledge of Spartans over time. Really not taking into account how much even older history that we do have even without the Library of Alexandria, but I digress. So the Library of Alexandria burns, and the beginning of the fall of the Western Roman Empire is here. Jesus agreed upon that he likely died in 30s AD under, I forgot what the name, Pontius Pontificus, orders for his crucifixion. I can't believe I'm doing this. So that means that the Spartans had to probably have left around here. Because this wasn't explained, so I'm kind of going by my own knowledge now. If the Spartans left around the late 200s AD, and that started the decline of the Western Roman Empire by the late 300s, that means they were probably definitely around when Jesus was. And that is why I think Jesus Christ is the one who started uniting the people against the oligarchical federation that ruled over us, against the Spartans. And that's why they left. Again, none of this is actually in the book. This is just me making it up. But imagine if this were actually in the book, I would have been like, okay, that's actually really interesting. No, this is not in the book. Right, so that's the first part of this world building, but the world building chapter isn't done yet. So as we said earlier, they are actually called the Spartan Federation, even though it's not really clearly explained. They've basically taken the Dolomite Mountains as their country. They are called the Spartan Federation, and it's said an oligarchical federation. Still not a whole lot of details about how like exactly it works and where they get their money from. But anyway, continuing the world building chapter, as I said before, the Spartans are split into the Olympian houses and the Chthonic houses. And that even though there are only 8 Olympian houses now, there were once at some point over 50 Olympian houses. But there have always been 4 Chthonic houses, always 4, the ones that we talked about. At some point, this is gonna get really nuts. They called this, at the turn of the 21st century, which means 2000s AD, Chthonics decided to wage war against the Olympians. Why? They just say to seize power. And the Chthonics were able to hold themselves up really well because their powers were of the nature of torture and mind control and pain, whereas Olympians are more self-enhancing powers like endurance and shields. Even still, this war raged on for at least 45 years because by the year 2045, the Olympian houses dwindled down to 8, and the 4 houses were still going strong. But even though the 4 houses were going strong, their numbers were going down. So not wanting to be just scattered pieces everywhere, they decided to sign a peace treaty in the year 2045 to basically call for a ceasefire. However, this doesn't end here. I should have made the timeline longer. In the year 2050, Titans appear. Now, Titans in this book are really just fast zombies. It's not clear where they came from. It's not clear if they are infected humans, infected Spartans, an entirely third thing that's not a zombie, technically just like some sort of monster, but they are described as like blackened monsters with like sharp teeth and long claws. They are described to have to have voices, to have like tattered clothing, which makes me think of zombies. But, blah, 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 the year 2050, Titans appear and they start attacking humans. Now, here's the thing. It's not really clear to me why the Titans are the Spartans' problem. I personally wish that there was like a concrete reason given for why Spartans do decide to get involved with the Titan problem that is killing the humans. Also, we don't get much of like the humanity's reaction to the Titan problem. But yeah, we'll get we'll get into basically all those non-answers in the story. I've been filming for like an hour and I still haven't talked about the story. But basically, okay, the year 2050, Titans appear, and that's when the Spartans come back down and reintroduce themselves to the humans and be like, hello, your savior is here. However, as reparations for starting the Great War, Chthonics are ordered to basically be the Titan Slayers, and they're called the Assembly of Death. I'm not going to write it down. You know what? That's too long to write down. They are the Assembly of Death. And as extra reparations for causing the Great War, they are also ordered to take part in gladiator games. And the gladiator games, I think, are going to be the focus of the next book. But also the gladiator, they're all immortal, and they do seem to have some sort of regenerative ability. So like, I guess it's just for entertainment to watch Chthonics fight each other. But yeah, so the year 2050, Titans appear, and the story finally starts in the year 2090. That's it's I don't know why I tried to draw 2090 without looking at it. And finally, our story begins. I ended up writing all my notes in chapter by chapter, so you're gonna get a real play-by-play on how this all works. And my notes are from my first blind read-through of this book, so there's just a lot of questions to myself that I did kind of try to make sense of later. So we begin with chapter 1, and right away, just in general, I knew this wasn't going to be the book for me. We begin with Alexis at 10 years old in the year 2090. She lives in rural Montana with her foster parents who are incredibly abusive to her. And this first chapter starts with her lying in the grass, thinking about death. Because she had just escaped. This is going to be really dark stuff. She had just escaped being tied up by essentially breaking her own hands and dislocating her thumbs to get out of the restraints. And while lying in the grass in rural Montana, a black snake slithers up to her and she's like, "Hey kid, what's up?" And she's like, "Oh my god, a black snake." And the snake is like, "You can hear me." And the girl's like, "Yeah, I can hear you." And the snake is like, "Oh, you smell like death, but you don't smell like fear. You're a strange child." And this girl's like, "Oh my god, a talking snake. That's so cool. You want to be friends?" And the snake is like, "Sure, I'll be your friend. My name is Nyx. I'm from an ancient race of invisible snakes called echidnas. I'd rather take the hedgehog." And okay, look, you can make a case that she's 10 years old, but here's the thing. Alexis's internal voice is exasperating, and it doesn't stop when she's 10 and grows up into 19, the age she is for most of this book. And also in chapter 1 is where we get the first of many references to a guy named Father John who we never see. So Alexis takes Nyx back to the trailer where she and her foster parents live. Her foster parents are drunk addicts who make bathtub alcohol out of cleaning products and yeast. And Nyx, for the first of many times, is like, "Hey, you want me to kill them for you?" And here, Alexis replies, "You can't. Killing is a sin. It's morally the worst thing you can ever do. Your soul will be corrupted. Father John says so." Father John sounds like a stupid idiot, M-. "You're too young to know what you speak of," Nyx said. "When you're older, you'll think differently." She was definitely going to hell for saying that. Italics. "Wait, M-, didn't Father John say snakes are evil, ... Am I going to hell for befriending her?" Eternal damnation was surprisingly complicated. She sleeps in a cardboard box, as if this couldn't get any worse. And later that night, the social worker, who is the fate lady from the white hair and purple eyes, comes to the trailer to drop off Charlie as the second foster child. Of course, being the abusive foster parents, they're just in it for the money, but they're like, "We didn't ask for a second kid." And it is said here that the United States government is led by the Spartan Federation. So at some point in history, and it's never explained because we don't come back to America for most of this book, at some point in history, I guess perhaps the Titan problem got so bad, and this world is described as being very apocalyptic and dystopian. At some point, perhaps the Spartan Federation basically took over the United States government, and I would have loved to have seen evangelist Christian's reactions to that. But again, like the Titans did pop up in 2050. But, 40 years. I don't know what possibly happened in the time between Titan's arrival in 2050 and then 40 years later. That's not explained. I'm curious about it, but this book isn't interested in answering any of my questions. So Charlie is dropped off, and he and Alexis immediately become tight friends because they're both stuck in this horrible situation together, and Charlie has selective mutism and Alexis has a stutter. I'm not gonna comment on the stutter representation here. It's just there. It's just there. She just stutters sometimes. So she and Charlie are best friends, and in the next chapter, chapter 2, they've been living together for about a year. Charlie is 1 year younger than Alexis, and Alexis is now 11 years old in the year 2091. It's winter, and Alexis overhears her foster parents talking about getting rid of Charlie. And, honestly, I'm quite surprised that despite this dystopian attitude that there's still enough of a child protective services agency or organization going on enough to place orphans with foster families. I would be less surprised if all the orphans just stayed in an orphanage, but I guess the point of putting her with abusive foster parents is for this next chapter. So Alexis overhears her foster parents planning on getting rid of Charlie. She tells Charlie to hide in the bathroom, and the bathroom is where the Titan emergency phone is, because the foster father hated seeing it, so he put it in the bathroom. And even though all these horrible things are going on, even though there is a child protective organization still operating somewhat, there are not enough emergency services to take care of anything except for Titan emergencies. So that's why the Titan emergency phone is there. So she tells Charlie to hide in the bathroom, and she confronts her foster parents about getting rid of Charlie. He's like, no, you can't get rid of him. But her foster parents are drunk and high from their bathtub alcohol, and they're like, what did you just say? And beat her to a bloody pulp. It's actually incredibly harrowing, this scene, and later on other high violence action scenes are incredibly harrowing to read. The problem with the writing, though, is that just when I'm getting into it, it ruins itself. So see here. So Alexis throws a toaster at them, and the foster mother is like, how effing dare you, mother demanded. Then they charged at me in a blur of screams and fists. Far away, glass shards bit into my soles. As mother shook my shoulders back and forth while screaming obscenities, her breaths reeked of chemicals. Father slammed his fist into my left eye, but I didn't feel anything. Time distorted. After a lifetime of pain, the brain learns how to suffer. I knew how to stay conscious through a beating. I'd had years to perfect my technique. The key was tensing your core and buttocks, humming and nihilism. Also, role-playing as a tortured 19th century musical prodigy in the imaginary throes of writing a violent opera helped. A haunting melody started playing in my head. Only I could hear the music. So here I am, reading about this 11-year-old girl standing up to her abusive foster parents about getting rid of her only friend, and I'm getting into the scene. Her parents are beating her up, and yet she completely takes me out by using the word buttocks and talking about pretending to be a 19th century musical prodigy writing an opera. And I'm like, where is this metaphor going? I thought you were being beat up. Every time I try to take this book seriously, it does not respect me. And look, maybe you can say, oh, humor is a coping mechanism that Alexis does in order to be able to live through this trauma, and I would say you're right. But there's a time and a place for humor. Like, you can't use your coping mechanisms as the trauma is happening. All the while this is happening, she can hear Nyx outside of the trailer. Nyx had gone out to hunt, and now Nyx has come back and she's hearing all this happening, and she's like, kid, let me in. Also, by the way, I should say that only Alexis can hear Nyx. I think she can still be touched, but she's invisible. But no one ever brings up the fact that, like, hey, what is this thing? Because Nyx likes to stay around Alexis's neck. No one ever brings it up, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. So Nyx somehow manages to break open the window, and this distracts the foster parents enough for Alexis to break away and lock herself into the bathroom with Nyx and Charlie. So I need to read this part to you because I marked it. So she is inside with Charlie. Again, like, when it comes to the horror bits, I'm actually invested, but the story doesn't isn't interested in that. Inside the cramped space, Charlie was curled up in a ball in the corner. His emaciated body was wedged between the toilet and the wall. Overly large, teary eyes looked at me with horror. Then he shook horror and ducked his head like he was trying to hide. Nyx yanked in my hands. "Release me," she hissed. "I need to kill those bastards for hurting you." Charlie didn't react, and I wasn't surprised. I'd long ago accepted that I was the only one who could hear Nyx. Everyone just assumed I was a loser who talked to herself. The loser part was still up for debate. Parentheses. This happens a lot, this parentheses thing. Parentheses it wasn't. I authored Emmy Noether and Carl Gauss fan fiction in my free time. End parentheses. So, unfortunately, Emmy Noether and Carl Gauss come up a lot. I had to look up who these people are. They're these German mathematicians from the 1800s and early 1900s, not contemporaries of each other. Alexis will bring them up, particularly Carl Gauss, multiple times as I think a running gag because she likes math and wants to be Carl Gauss when she grows up and discovers something groundbreaking in algebra by the time she's 21. Which is nice. That is an interesting, fun little goal to set up, except that's a fun little goal for a teenager and not a 19 going on 20-year-old later in the book, because even though she's 11 now, she does not change when she is 19. So after this happens, Alexis hears through the door that something is happening, and the foster father bangs on the door, "Let me in, something has your mother," and Alexis is like, "She was never my mother." But the foster father is saying, "Something invisible has her. She's foaming at the mouth. I think she's dying. I think it's a Titan." Again, they are in the bathroom. They don't see this. Alexis thinks that the Titan must have gotten into the house through the broken window that Nyx came in through. And Alexis makes the choice to not call the emergency services and to let her foster mother die. Eventually, emergency responders do come from a neighbor's call, and they assess the situation and ask Alexis, "Was this a Titan that killed your mother, or was it him, the foster father?" And Alexis says, it was him. Throughout all this, the emergency responders are absolute shit to her. This is a running theme as well. Everyone hates Alexis. Like, literally, they say, "You don't qualify for hospital treatment." And I'm just like, America hasn't changed at all. Also, I wasn't really sure if these emergency responders were Spartans or if they were humans who are employed by Spartans. And, I don't like either answer. But they take the foster father away. The emergency responders say, "Oh, he'll probably be sentenced to death." And I'm just like, I guess the justice system is fucked up too. America hasn't changed, even under a new government. But they just leave them there. They just leave Alexis and Charlie in this broken trailer. After trying to sleep, Alexis wakes up to find that she is beaten black and blue, and that she is now deaf in her left ear and blind in her right eye. You can see here in this art that her right eye is white now. She used to have two black eyes, but now she has a white eye, and that is her blind spot. I can't really say much on the disability representation here because every once in a while her left ear will ring due to loud noises, but I guess she just suffers through the pain of it. It's not really a huge deal. I don't really recall her half blindness coming up a lot. So yeah, they're just there. Oh wait, was it her right side or left side? Whoops. Wait a second, which eye is this? No, wait, okay, so now I'm confused. Okay, because I went back to the part I wanted to read. It says here that she's blind and deaf on her left side, but is the white eye the... Oh yeah, see, so the left eye... Okay, I'm going crazy. Is this the left eye or the right eye? This is the right eye, but then the book says the left eye is white. Unless I'm going crazy and I don't remember which way's left. I mean, this is left if I'm looking at her, but then that must not be... Oh my god. Okay, I just discovered this. I think the illustration's wrong. It didn't get her eye color right. Oh my god. As I was saying, she's now half blind and half deaf, and she sees herself as a monster for the part she had to play in her foster mother's death. The girl in the mirror looked calm, covered in cuts with eerie mismatched eyes. She was intimidating, powerful. To her right, the emergency phone hung untouched on the wall. "Who is she? I must know her name," Carl Gauss would say if he saw her walking down the street in Brunswick, Germany. "That girl will be my prodigy." I smiled. My abusers were gone. I was free. In those early hours, I befriended the second monster I'd ever meet. Myself. The first monster was Nyx. At least I thought I did. Later, I'd come to understand that I was both very right and very, very, very wrong about that assessment. Monsters were tricky like that. By the time you saw them for what they truly are, it was already too late. So this part made me confused for a lot of reasons. So she is now accepting of her monstrous qualities, but she thought she befriended the second. Okay, so in the early hours, I befriended the second monster I'd ever meet. At least I thought I did. So she thought she befriended, or she thought she was a monster? Is she fooling herself and she's aware that she's fooling herself? Because she says monsters were tricky like that. By the time you saw them for what they truly were, it was already too late. So I think, okay, so what we do learn later is that, vague spoilers, Alexis is very much more responsible for her foster mother's death than she originally thought. I still don't understand. She was right and wrong about, I don't know what she's right or wrong about, because I know now from reading this book that her role is more involved, so she would consider herself more monstrous. Anyway, this is just one of the many confusing things about this book. Also, again, she's having a serious moment about trying to accept her complacency in her foster mother's death, and yet I have to think about German mathematician Karl Gauss. So the next morning at the end of chapter 2 now, some guy comes to their trailer and is like, this is an uninhabitable crime scene now, so you guys better leave. And 11-year-old Alexis and 10-year-old Charlie are like, what are we gonna do? What are we supposed to do? And they're like, I don't know. And now they're homeless. So we get to chapter 3, and chapter 3 is titled Surviving Hell, parentheses, high school. Basically here, Alexis is like one of those goth kids from South Park where she is bullied for being the homeless girl in her school and everybody else is a prep and a poser, and she's the moody emo kid who doesn't speak to anybody. Also, it's said here that they have computers and there's a huge underground market for refurbished early 21st century computers. This is the year 2091 now. Sure, I can speak for civilization and technology advancements stalling due to Titans attacking, but that was in the year 2050. So between the year 2050 and, let's say, our year, or the year this was published, 2024, like early 20, like how early are we talking 21st century computers? I'm not a computer expert or anything, but you could make a case for cars lasting as long as 50 years or more, because Cuba, with its embargoes, they have a huge culture around refurbishing their cars from the 50s and them being like pristine condition. But you know, the thing about computers, and what's the word I forgot the term, where computers, especially computers made nowadays, are planned to break down over a certain period of time so that customers will buy more computers. I just got really hung up on these early 21st century computers in the year 2091. And this is a throwaway line. Like, you can't throw those lines away past me. I catch everything. Cause here's the thing. We don't see a Spartan use a computer. Apparently, their sciences are so advanced, we never see them use a computer. Comment down below if you think a computer can last 65 years, even with refurbishments. I can't imagine that. Like, sometimes shit just breaks. I don't know. Anyway, this is a throwaway line about computers that never comes back again. Even though Alexis can be like really weird, annoying, and like kind of cringy sometimes, basically for the entirety of this book, I read her more as a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, rather than a 19-year-old, which made everything that happens later incredibly creepy. But every once in a while, Alexis does get me. And this goes to show that there are points in the book where you can bring in some humor, bring in some levity. There's a time and a place for that, but there is not a time and a place for humor when you're being beaten up by your foster parents. Here's the part where I actually kind of thought it was funny. So in class, they get the news that the Assembly of Death, particularly Achilles and Patroclus, I refuse to call him Patro, that they are being live streamed fighting a Titan. So Mr. Brewer Timothy, the school quarterback, parentheses Tim Tom in my head, asked with a chagrined expression, "Can we play the video on the projector so that everyone can see the Chthonics annihilate the Titans?" "Do whatever you want, you're seniors," said Mr. Brewer, who was eating his breakfast sausage loudly. "Can I bite a student now?" Nix asked. Discreetly, as all teenagers are known to do, I banged my invisible homicidal snake best friend against the desk to stop her from crushing me to death because I wouldn't let her murder my classmates. Things were not well. I will give credit where credit is due. That part made me chuckle. So in this live stream, we see Achilles and Patroclus. And again, they are part of the Assembly of Death, as it is a requirement for all Chthonics to join so they can fight off the Titans. And we see in this video that Titans are described with black veins covering their skin, with long black claws, and we can see that they can speak. And in this video, the Titan is like begging for them to not harm them, but they are attacking them, which makes me think that there's some sort of possible mastermind behind the Titans going on, or there's, again, I'm thinking there's some sort of zombie where the brain and the body are fighting each other, but none of that matters because that's not explored here. Achilles and Patroclus are for some reason called the Crimson Duo, and they are a pair of Titan fighting hotties. And we also see in this book that they get stats. They get this whole character chart of stats and attributes. It really just reminded me of the character charts that I used to make when I was in middle school. None of this information matters, but we see Achilles, and he is the son of Ares and an unnamed human mother, which makes him a mutt. Now, this was explained in the opening world building chapter, but basically, But basically, if you are half Spartan, it doesn't matter if you're half creature or half human, you are called a mutt, which is incredibly degrading if you ask me, but I think that's the point. And this was also explained in the world building chapter that Spartans in general have had a fertility problem. So Olympians have been trying to increase their ranks by having half Spartan children with creatures or humans, but Chthonics for the most part have been strictly Chthonics only. And of course that made me think about like what's the genetic diversity in this, but we're not going to think about that. For some reason, generally, the population has always stayed at a baseline 100 or so. Then I'm thinking about, well, if they can't die, then at some point, if they keep populating, then the whole world is going to be overrun with Spartans. And Spartans do need to eat and drink water. And this just goes to show that immortality is a scam. Anyway, back to the video. Mutt is so degrading, so I'm not even going to say that. But Achilles is half Spartan, son of Ares, and he wears a muzzle. It's explained here that he wears a muzzle because his power is related to his voice, and when he speaks, he has the power to torture others, which is why he is ordered by the Olympians to wear a muzzle. Why did they agree to this? I don't know why, but probably threat of being dismembered or something. The only person who has his key is Patroclus, and Patroclus is a half Spartan son of Aphrodite. And in this video, they are fighting the Titan together. Achilles pulls a gun on the Titan. It's also explained here that he and Patroclus and Charon and Augustus run a weapons manufacturing company together. That doesn't really matter. I think they also say that the Titans are immortal like the Spartans are. They don't really die. They just... Or do they die? I don't know. I don't even remember. But basically, they defeat the Titan. Everybody in the class is like, ooh, they're so hot. And even Alexis is like, yeah, I've secretly went on like the secret Spartan fan fiction website where people who claim to have slept with any of the Chthonics are uploading drawings of their genitals. And she also explains that Achilles and Patroclus and all the Chthonics are known to be sluts for people of any gender. And look, I will give credit where credit is due that this is a relatively queer-friendly world where no one bats an eye if you're in a same-sex relationship. I don't know if trans or gender non-conforming people exist. This book isn't interested in exploring that. Alexis goes to the library. She talks about a librarian named Doreen who doesn't come up later, but Alexis spends a lot of time talking about how much she admires Doreen for being a badass and carrying a gun in the school. I don't know why. But she's called to the principal's office because Charlie got in a fight, and she is ordered to take him home. And home for them, ever since they were kicked out of their foster parents' trailer, has been a cardboard box in the trailer park. And Look, it sounds really nice considering what they've had to go through. Alexis tutors for food vouchers. There was a little bit of a part here where like one of the kids he tutors actually thanks her for helping him get a higher test score, and he propositions her for a night together, and she's like, ew, no way. Carl Gauss is the only one for me. Also, I don't like being touched by people. They managed to make a life for themselves. They found a stray dog named Fluffy. The local Satanist in the neighborhood helps them out sometimes. They've managed to carve out a decent living for themselves despite the hardship. But Alexis's goal is, now that she's 19, she's able to take this like Spartan National Merit Test, which I think is like some sort of test that Spartans give to humans to qualify for high quality positions and stuff like that, to be able to work for the Spartan Federation. Now that Alexis is 19, she is now taking the test in chapter 4. It's said here that the test is in Latin. It's an all-day test. It reminds me of taking the standardized tests in school. But at the end of this test, there is a blood test. So they prick their finger and put 2 thumbprints on the paper. But when Alexis does this, the paper disintegrates, and that is a sign that she has Spartan blood. So the teacher calls it in, and 2 Spartan Federation officers, I guess, teleport into the gymnasium, and she's like, oh my god, what's happening? And the 2 guards, the 2 officers are like, oh my god, it's another female fangirl who's using black market Spartan blood to get close to the Crimson Duo, to Achilles and Patroclus. Because again, Achilles and Patroclus are huge hotties. Everyone wants to get into their pants. Poor Alexis just wanted to take this test. But these officers are like, oh my god, you're just another female fangirl who used Spartan blood, and the penalty for that is death. But she's like, I don't know what's going on. So they give her this adrenaline / poison shot, where let's say she actually does have Spartan blood, this won't kill her, it's just an adrenaline, but if she is a human, then it will kill her in 3 minutes. And during this 3 minutes, the officers helpfully espouse so much exposition. There hasn't been a female mutt in centuries, he said, and while there are some heiresses, they're the most honorable and pure of us all, M-. You're nothing like them. He gagged after he spoke, like the thought of comparing me to them made him sick, then continued ranting. An heiress would never be caught dead participating in any Spartan initiations, or found in a, he looked around in the room with disgust, dump like this. He shivered dramatically and muttered about dishonor and protecting the pure house ways. He shook his head again. Mutt or heiress, no Spartan would ever voluntarily abandon a female baby, M-. It's blasphemous. His expression was horrified. Our female numbers are so low. We stared at each other for a long, awkward moment. Italics, is he waiting for me to say something? I didn't speak. Unfortunately, he took this as a sign to continue. Guess what? You're not even the first one to do this. Last year we had 18 fraudulent positives, all simpering girls, ... Do you think we like to waste resources leaping across the globe only for you to be fangirls who we have to fucking murder? Kronos, it's embarrassing the state humanity has fallen to. Fun fact, because you're about to be 6 feet deep, mutts used to microdose on this stuff to compete with heirs, but that stopped because every single one of them went insane. Not that you need me to lecture you on insanity. The timer beeped, and the Spartan who'd been standing silently gaped at it. Boss, look, he held up with wide eyes. This isn't even all of it. There was like a little bit more before, in the part before I read. She talks about Carl Gauss again. But yeah, apparently there's a black market for Spartan blood. And human fangirls, for some reason, think they can get close to Achilles and Patroclus by faking their blood test. And female numbers are so low, no one would ever voluntarily abandon a female baby. Female half-Spartans are so rare, and I'm like, this girl is possibly about to die, but thank you for giving us all of this exposition right now. And I will say now that comparing Alexis to full-blooded Spartan heiresses will happen a lot. Dishonor and honorable ways will happen a lot. So anyway, Alexis is surviving the poison. They're like, okay, so I guess you are actually half Spartan. You're 19 years old, right? She's like, yeah. And he's like, damn girl, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to take you. And they teleport her away. And she is taken to the Dolomites Colosseum in northern Italy, where conveniently the Initiation Massacre is happening. And I'm gonna pause here for a second because we see around her in the Colosseum stands the flags of the 8 Olympian houses and the 4 Chthonic houses. And some of these symbol choices are incredibly questionable. So it's a gold lion for the house of Zeus, a rainbow peacock for the house of Hera, the purple owl of the house of Athena, the green fish of the house of Hermes, the blue dolphin of the house of Poseidon, the brown pig of the house of Demeter, the yellow eagle of the house of Apollo, and the purple and green goat of the house of Dionysus. Well, if it's supposed to be that Greek and Roman mythology is derived from these immortal Spartans, then wouldn't their symbols be the same? Okay, yes, peacocks are a known symbol of Hera. Dolphins are a pretty good symbol for the house of Poseidon. A goat for the house of Dionysus. No, okay, no, but a pig for the house of Demeter? Are you serious? And then, here's the thing. The eagle goes to Apollo, but the lion goes to Zeus. And even though an eagle is more of a Zeus symbol than a lion, you could have given cows or bulls to Apollo because sacred bulls are... I think sacred bulls were his object one time. Wasn't that in the Odyssey? An owl is a symbol of Athena, but a purple owl is like, what are we doing here? Like, why a brown pig for Demeter? You hate her so much? Just give her some wheat and a sickle like everybody else. A purple and green goat. What do these look like? Just some questionable choices in general. Anyway, I shouldn't be lingering too much on these Olympian houses because none of them matter except for House Zeus, pretty much. So then we get to the 4 symbols of the Chthonic houses, and it's the charging minotaur of the house of Ares, the skeleton hellhound of the house of Hades, the rabid horse of the house of Artemis, and the black swan of the house of Aphrodite. Okay, again, Artemis getting the short end of the stick. You can't have used hunting dogs or stags or deer for Artemis. Artemis, the goddess of nature and the hunt and the wild. Oh my god. She has a rabid horse? Horses aren't known to be her symbol. Horses are Poseidon's thing. Does all of my Percy Jackson knowledge mean nothing to you? Oh, no, my camera. The symbols don't mean anything. That's just something that really annoyed me when I was reading this. And for some reason, Alexis notes here that even from afar, the Chthonic Spartans looked menacing. The men and women were taller and stronger, parentheses, more attractive, the teenage pervert inside me noted unhelpfully. What are you, 12? Come on, girl. You're in an initiation deathmatch. She doesn't know it yet. But she's in the Colosseum. I feel like she should be more shocked. So Zeus comes up and is explaining what's happening, like getting the show rolling, and explains here that this is the Initiation Massacre. Literally the word massacre, which is incredibly gruesome, incredibly gory, which is an incredibly strong word to use. I don't understand why deathmatch could have been used. This is a deathmatch. I'm just gonna call it deathmatch. Like, massacre is an extremely strong word choice here that bothered me a lot. So Zeus says here that there are 50 initiates in the Colosseum and they've all reached the age of 19. So Spartans are not born immortal. We don't know how they become immortal, but basically in Spartan society, you have to earn the right to be immortal. So the initiation deathmatch here is to cull the 50 initiates down to 10 to endure the crucible. I don't know why they use the word crucible here. It's basically, that is the Spartan War Academy. The Crucible is the Spartan War Academy. And this is a good time to note here that it seems that Spartans do have some sort of religion or some sort of deity that they invoke the name of. Every once in a while, they will invoke the name of Kronos. So Zeus says here, as Kronos declared at the dawn of time, immortality is not a right, it's a privilege. And every once in a while, some characters will say Kronos, like Kronos blessed, or oh my Kronos. They don't say oh my Kronos, but basically Kronos is their version is a god of their society. That isn't really explained further than that. And that leads us into chapter 5, the start of the initiation deathmatch. Hades comes up and he explains that weapons are not allowed. But weapons aren't allowed, but I forgot to mention, because of how much she does not matter, Nyx is still wrapped around Alexis's throat. And I actually did look this up, that according to D&D at least, that animals do count as a weapon attack in D&D. I don't know if it counts in the law, but I was a little bit like, so none of these powerful Spartans can see the invisible snake wrapped around this girl's neck and biting people. This will come up later. Another quick thing I want to nitpick, and I think this is something that comes up a lot, and dare I say, comes up a lot in stories written by white authors. We do see Hades and we see Persephone, and Persephone is described with golden tan skin, and even Alexis is described with golden tan skin, and other characters are described with tan as their skin descriptor. And here's the thing, tan by definition when used to describe skin means skin that has been browned by the sun, which means that they can revert back to their fair, like tan isn't their natural skin color. Tan is a color, but by definition, when used to describe skin, means browned by the sun. Just use the word brown. And I feel like, to be honest, this is just like shorthand to like get the ambiguously exotic ethnic character without actually putting in the work for it. You know, the ambiguously olive toned main character. Not olive, it's golden tan. It's like, she's white. So Hades's power is this black smog, and later confirmed to be a black smog that like shows your worst fears or tortures you. I forgot which one it is. But basically, again, when it comes to the action scenes, they are incredibly bloody, incredibly gory, not terribly written. I was actually getting into it. There's bodies everywhere. And to note here is that every other initiate is a boy except for Alexis. So I'm scared for her, but she's a tough, scrappy girl. Plus Nyx is biting people invisibly from around her neck. Doesn't count as a weapon, apparently. At some point in the fight, Nyx gets hurt and Alexis flies into this rage, pummeling people. And she also notices that there's a boy with red eyes. Now, red eyes is a characteristic for chthonics. And she notices this boy with red eyes, and Zeus says earlier when he is welcoming everyone to the deathmatch that he's like, we don't have any chthonics participating this year. And I'm a little bit like, huh? But she sees this boy supposedly torturing another boy and saving her. But she's like, oh my God, chthonics are evil. Because she was apparently raised Catholic in rural Montana, because she still likes to talk about Father John every once in a while. If I could have a nickel for every time Father John or any Judeo-Christian term like hell or sin is brought up here, I would have a lot of nickels. I would have a lot, okay? Be grateful that I don't bring up every time she uses it. It's crazy. But finally, the buzzer is called. 10 initiates are left, and they are the winners, or the survivors of the initiation deathmatch. And Alexis is covered in blood. Her hair has been torn at, her clothes have been ripped, and I'm of course horrified for her. I don't think about her nakedness being sexy, but she says this, and all of my immersion is completely ruined. My clothes were torn and hanging off my body as rags, but at least the hair ties still covered the raised scars on my wrists. She wears like hair ties to cover up her wrist scars that she got in chapter 1. I was half naked, covered in scraps and streaks of sand, but I couldn't find the energy to care. Italics, free the nipple and the lips, parentheses, vaginal? I mean, you know, if humor is to be used as a coping mechanism here, I don't think it's being done well. So the 10 final survivors get medical attention, and we see, once again, the woman with white hair and violet eyes, the Lady Fate. She comes up to Alexis and asks her what's her name. Alexis is still reeling from shock and can't answer her. The lady slaps her in the face and she's like, Alexis Hurt, don't make me regret choosing you. And she's like, wait, you know my name, why are you asking me? I don't know what's going on, but she says, my name is Alexis Hurt. And the Lady Fate says this. Her blue eyes faded back to violet as she patted me on the cheek and smiled sweetly. And don't you forget it, dearie. She leaned close and whispered conspiratorially, girl to girl, M dash. I'd take a chance on the killers if you know what I mean, M dash, even with their hounds. She winked and wrote my name on her scroll. Don't let their ... passion ... scare you away. What? I asked. She wiggled her brows and waddled away, stepping on bodies as she headed towards Zeus. She might be worse off than neighbor Paul pre-shovel. Again, okay, also alongside Father John, she occasionally likes to bring up neighbor Paul and his shovel. We never see neighbor Paul and his shovel. He is a one-off joke that was brought up in chapter 1, that he was a crazy neighbor in her old trailer park who got whacked on the head by a shovel. This isn't funny. This isn't a funny running gag, okay? So poor Alexis, reeling from shock at having survived a massacre, is encouraged to get dicked down by killers. Don't let their passion scare you away. I'm like, oh my God, what can they... There's a time and a place for this, okay? I'm reeling from this death match. I can't constantly have my emotions whack-a-moled around by the priorities of horniness, okay? So the next step in this initiation is for mentors to be assigned to the 10 survivors. And just like how Violet Sorrengail got 2 dragons in 4th Wing, Alexis gets 2 mentors, Achilles and Patroclus. And Patroclus is immediately rude and cruel and cold to her. Everybody hates her, calling her an abandoned mutt. Patroclus is like, we don't care about you. Don't expect us to care about you. You're just another girl who wants to get close to the Crimson Duo. Just do as we say so you can survive and we can get promoted. So for the mentors of successful initiates to attain immortality, they get promoted to generals. I don't know why they want to become generals, but okay, this comes up a lot. And Alexis, appropriately, passes out. Alexis wakes up to more medical attention. Patroclus is still mean and rude and cold to her. Like, how the fuck did you survive? You're so fucking like constant swearing. I'm so sorry. Like, how did you even qualify? You're so fucking weak. And poor me and poor Alexis is like, we were just dumped here. And look, let me say this right now, before we get more into this video, that this entire book could have been made way shorter if the Spartans had any sense for administration, okay? Because they just dumped Alexis in the middle of this death match and everything could have been figured out and resolved way earlier if they had just went up to Alexis and said, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? Who are your parents? And Alexis would have been like, I don't know. And then they could have been like, okay, we can take a test to figure out who your parents are. Because they make a huge deal about how female abandoned babies are so important. And really, if they're such an advanced society, they would have had laws protecting female children, and they could have been like, who the hell abandoned you? We better find out who your parent is so we can punish them. It's said a little bit later, but I'll just say it now, that Alexis does suggest a paternity test, a parent test, but Patroclus says, oh, Spartan blood is too acidic for tests like that. And I just go, wow. This society is so scientifically advanced, but they don't have basic chemistry? Back to chapter 6. She's getting medical attention. Patroclus calls her weak. Patroclus is insulting her. And then Patroclus and Achilles are like, we should kill the doctors so they don't blab to anyone else about how weak our mentee is. And Achilles, who's in a muzzle, by the way, he does sign language. And he signs to Patroclus, yeah, we should kill them later. And Alexis, by the way, knows sign language because Charlie has selective mutism. I don't think I mentioned to say, they don't say selective mutism in the book, but basically he is nonverbal for most of the time, unless in key moments. So I think it's selective mutism. You can correct me if I'm wrong, please, but that's what I think. So Alexis knows sign language, but she doesn't say because she's like, oh shit, these guys are fucking evil. They want to kill the doctor so they don't talk. And this is where I realized that The chthonic houses are basically the mafia. Weapons manufacturing, constantly described wearing three-piece suits and weapons holsters everywhere. Basically the mafia. They're basically the mafia. So Alexis goes into a coma for a few days, I think maybe even a week or two, to recover from her injuries. And she talks about like these moments of lucidity where it's not said who exactly, she's just describes them, and she mentions one in particular. This time Death himself hovered over me with his hand possessively on my ankle. He had pale skin and hateful blood-red eyes, and he watched me without blinking. A foreign sensation of intrigue and curiosity filled my chest. Semicolon. It was possessive. I'd never felt anything like it. And basically throughout like these moments of lucidity, she's insulted and she's regarded cruelly. By the way, I should mention here that all Spartans have animal protectors. The animal protectors don't really do anything. Achilles has a wolf, Patroclus has a jaguar. They're just mentioned a couple of times, but they're not integral to the plot or contribute in any meaningful way other than being there. So, but you should know because I'm doing an incredibly close reading on this book. And I think this is supposed to be Charon who's supposed to be here. I think Augustus is supposed to be here because it's the four of them that run this weapons manufacturing company, so they're all incredibly close. And then finally, Alexis is now fully conscious. Patroclus sends for a doctor and he's mean to the doctor. Specifically, he requested a lady doctor because he doesn't trust the men. The lady doctor is like, oh my god, like, okay, yes, I'm a healer. I promise I won't do anything to her. But then when the door closes, she's like, oh my god. And I'm like, me too. But this lady doctor does the exact same thing as those Spartan officers from the test. And while she's cutting open Alexis's cast, she's like helpfully dumping a lot more thoughts and exposition on us. Be careful around the Crimson Duo, she murmured as she leaned across me. I jolted at her close proximity. They're dangerous, she murmured as she kept cutting. Italics. No way, they seem super nice. I mean, look at who they're friends with. She moved to my leg bandage and mumbled something about air psychopaths who everyone's obsessed with under her breath. She shivered dramatically and then pulled the sheet down to work on my ribs. And then skip ahead a little bit. Picking up her bag, the doctor moved to the last bandages on my head. You know, her voice dropped to a whisper, like she was afraid of being overheard. Rumor is they were going to send Achilles to the underworld after his performance in the SGC. A chthonic mutt like him with that type of power, you're just asking for a repeat of the Great War. The Great War is the war between the Olympians and the chthonics. The underworld, which is lowercase, by the way, I think they should have made it uppercase, is apparently like the special Spartan prison for Spartans. And Medusa is there. So I don't think I talked about this before, but in this world, Artemis has not one but two kids. And Artemis is paired up with Gorgon to give birth to Medusa. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about this because Gorgon and Medusa is kind of complicated. Like, I tried to look this up, but Gorgon and Medusa seem to be incredibly interchangeable in Greek mythology. So I'm not even going to touch that. Medusa doesn't show up in this book, but just so you know. Right, and then she mentions the SGC, which is the Spartan gladiator competition that chthonics are required to participate in every 3 years. So she continues, I mean, they founded that horrible weapons company with Augustus and Charon, who are actual sociopaths. I've heard they've even been diagnosed. I mean, look at what they choose to represent themselves. Her nose scrunched with disgust. Something tells me that the D and L of WSDL don't stand for dazzling and lovely. All right, so another thing I need to explain is that the weapons company is called WSDL. And commonly people think that the W stands for war, which represents Achilles, son of Ares, and that the S represents sex, which is for Patroclus, the son of Aphrodite. This is something that comes up for some reason. So she talks a lot, this lady doctor. Okay, continuing on with her dialogue, skipping a little bit ahead. The fact that Patro took a Spartan oath to only take the muzzle off Achilles if necessary is pure insanity. Everyone knows bad things happen to people who take Spartan oaths outside of marriage and animal bonding. She smiled down at me. I'm probably boring you since you already know all this. Ah, yes, thankful deflection from this being actual exposition dumping. And Alexis thinks, italics, actually, madam, I know nothing, and I can't tell you if you want my kidney or not, because this running joke of the chapter is that she thinks the lady doctor is gonna harvest her organs. I don't know why. And then the lady doctor keeps going. You know, it makes sense that you break easily, M dash. The House of Zeus is known for its fertility issues. All the recent mutts have ... struggled. Thank goodness for Theros. He's the first heir they've borne in centuries. The Olympian houses have all had difficulties with their progeny's strength after the Great War. Again, this doesn't really get explained in this book, but the concept of heirs and heiresses is that they're the full-blooded children of the house leaders. But if they're all immortal to the point where they can't be killed, what's the point of having an heir and heiress system other than as an alternate officer if the leader is indisposed? I don't get it, but whatever. The lady doctor continues, but the new marriage law is going to fix all that. Thank Kronos, she beamed. Everyone's talking about it. It's genius, making all citizens of Sparta take a marriage oath when they turn 26. Well, everyone but the house leaders, obviously. No one tells them what to do. I frowned. Excuse me? A marriage law at 26? I'd be a child bride. That was kind of funny. The best part, the doctor continued, oblivious to my mental breakdown, they put in a clause that listed out all 10 of the chthonic names and stated they were restricted from only marrying someone on that list. Chthonic leaders refused to comply if chthonics were wholly forbidden from marrying each other, so the Federation compromised and added the only. Either way, they must marry an Olympian, she scoffed. The technicality doesn't actually matter. The next generation of chthonic blood will be diluted with Olympian blood. There's no way for them to find a loophole. They find a loophole. The Federation claims the law is for Sparta's fertility struggles, but everyone knows it's really to force the chthonics into alliances with the Olympians. It's brilliant. She moved to brush more hair off my forehead, and I dodged her hand. Her eyes narrowed. Well, she huffed, I tried to help you. As she packed up her supplies, she mumbled under her breath, even though you're just a filthy abandoned mutt. And Alexis, God bless her, actually tries to warn the lady doctor that, like, Achilles and Patroclus might be out to kill her. But she's just like, just worry about yourself, girl. You don't know anything. Okay, so this thing about the marriage law. Okay, I don't know what all 10 of the chthonic names mean, because according to the family tree, there are only like 6. Was it 6? I think it was 6. So I don't know what 10 chthonic names are because they don't include the head houses, and Persephone's already married to Hades. But anyway, so in this marriage law, all Spartans have to be married at 26 and stay together for all immortality. It's explained later that Spartan oaths are like the top shit. I don't know what's the punishment for breaking an oath. So in order for the Olympians to get a leg up over the chthonics, but still have the chthonics agree to the law, is that they have a no marry list. So only these names you are not allowed to marry. So they can't marry each other, even though the chthonics still signed that, even though they didn't want to be restricted from marrying. I don't really get it. I don't really get it. Because I don't know who's on the list and I don't know who is not on the list. So if who is on the list is all of their eligible bachelor and bachelorettes, then I guess maybe the chthonics were thinking about future generations, because then they wouldn't be on the list. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. They do find a loophole, unfortunately, later. Anyway, poor Alexis tried to warn the doctor, and the doctor's like, psst, you don't know anything. I'm not in danger. You are. And she leaves. And finally we get up to chapter 7, where Patroclus insults her some more. Look, reading every chapter where poor Alexis is getting insulted and treated cruelly, I spent more time processing from what I read rather than actually reading. And yeah, Patroclus tells her she smells repulsive, she looks ugly. And this part is like, again, just goes to show how incredibly immature the writing can be sometimes. So he says, try not to slip and break your neck, that would be inconvenient. She thinks in her head, purposely try to die in the shower, got it. Clutching the sheet closer to my chest, I waited for them to leave. Understood, Patro narrowed his eyes. Crystal clear, I whispered. For some reason, I couldn't hold my tongue around him. Good, great, fantastic, fabulous. That was her stutter. Stupendous, superb. Are we 5? Are we 5 years old? It's like, yeah. Yeah. And later in the chapter, it's here where he says, we can't just test your blood. You're not just a weak human anymore. Spartan blood is too acidic to test, obviously. Like, just going on to be incredibly condescending to her, incredibly mean to her, flipping her off. And for some reason, Alexis finds the courage to talk back to this guy. And here's the thing. She does realize this later, too later for my taste, but she does realize later that, like, hey, they need me. Because if she survives, they get promoted to generals. So it would have been nicer for her to realize that sooner, so then I could have believed easier that she's talking back sassy to these guys, even though they're psychotic killers who run a gun manufacturing company. Yeah, there's no sense in this book. Patroclus asks her what her power is because, as I said earlier, Spartans are super powered humans. They all have some sort of power that is more or less fully manifested by age 19. And Patroclus is like, tell us what your fucking power is. And she's like, I don't have one. And he punches the wall like an angry 15-year-old teenager who got his Xbox Live canceled by his mom. Also, I should say here that Patroclus and Achilles, and basically everybody assumes because it can't be tested, that Alexis is an abandoned female half-Spartan from the house of Zeus. Just on the basis that her hair and eye color are the same as his, like her white eye and her blonde hair. And Patroclus says, well, Olympian power is supposed to feel like pleasurable and bubbly. You've never felt this. And poor Alexis is like, I felt nothing but pain in my entire life. But, you know, she never tells any of them about her home life, about her upbringing. She was abandoned as a baby. She'd never thought that she was an Olympian. She didn't grow up thinking she was an Olympian. She never told anyone this. And you will see later in the book that everybody assumes that she's just a sheltered human girl who's like playing the pathetic game. And I'm just like, this is incredibly annoying and I hate being here. But Patroclus asks her, so you've never felt like what Olympian power is supposed to feel like? And then she asks, well, what does your power feel like? And he says, chthonic power feels like pain. He says, painful and all-consuming in a way that Olympians can never understand, but that's not any of your business. He shook his head and narrowed his eyes cruelly. The only women chthonics are heirs, he said vehemently. A half-human female chthonic is literally impossible. Our power would rip you to shreds from the inside out. It would tear you into pathetic pieces and boil your womb. You can't even fathom what we feel. And this got me kind of chuckling. Alexis thinks, riveting, sounds like an average menstrual cycle. And then she goes on to say that because she'd spent most of her life starving, she never had a proper menstrual cycle, which is really sad, actually. Apparently, chthonic female half-Spartans are impossible because the power is all-consuming and would rip you to shreds, even though it sounds like the average menstrual cycle. And here's where I thought that perhaps Alexis is half Olympian, half Spartan, because we haven't heard of anything like that yet. So after this, Patroclus gives her some reading and explains to her what to look forward to in Spartan War Academy. So 4 classes. The first is Pythagorean, advanced math coupled with philosophy. Second, lost classical lore, which focuses on archaic history and Latin. Third, discipline and power, D and P for short. The most useful class since it covers powers, Spartan oaths, mental, shielding, and leaping. And the 4th class is more of a project in which they are required to bond with an animal protector. Again, the animal protectors don't really do anything. I had to look up what Pythagorean is, and I think it's just a shortened Pythagorean. You know, the guy with the triangle. I didn't want to go into a math wiki hole, so I just call it math class. So basically it's math class, history class, magic class, and this is the toughest initiation process in any young Spartan's life. We'll get to Spartan War Academy later. It's basically a boot camp. And Patroclus tells Alexis that don't tell anyone you don't have any powers or else you will be ripped to shreds. Everyone will target you because you're a abandoned female and also powerless. And I'm like, great. Thanks. Patroclus just reads so emo here, and I'm like, am I supposed to like him? He's just constantly going on and on about like, Olympians would never understand, you would never understand, you're just a stupid human girl. And I'm like, am I supposed to like you? Because I kind of want to kick you in the nuts. Also, I forgot to mention here that in the beginning of the chapter, while Alexis is like washing off her repulsive smell, she cries in the shower appropriately, and she thinks about Charlie. And as I thought, she chooses not to contact Charlie about where she's been. She has a somewhat reasonable, I guess, explanation that like she doesn't want Charlie to be anywhere around these guys because chthonics are evil, which is fair, but then it's like, it just rings very, how to say, it would be more exciting at any point to see Alexis actively take something into her own hands to try and make a bargain with Patroclus to be like, look, I have a little brother and I will do whatever you say as long as I can get a message out to him that I'm okay, or work behind their backs and it's like, I gotta get this message out to Charlie to tell him that I'm okay. If she had just done that, done like any reasonable, compassionate human thing to let her brother know that she's alive and okay, ish, then I would have been like, yeah, you go, Alexis. But she's just like, I can't contact Charlie or else these evil chthonics will come after him. And I'm like, fair, but like, can we try to take something into our own hands here? I get it, she's traumatized though, but like literally does not think about Charlie. Even when she does think she has the upper hand, for one brief moment in this book, she thinks she has the upper hand. She does not. But he does come back later, literally at the very end. We'll get there. So for the first day of school, she gets a toga, which is, they call it a toga, but in my head it just looks like a athleisure wear. And she is teleported away to torture school. So torture school is basically a vampire cave in the mountains or whatever. And it's described as a cave system with red wax candles and grotesque statues. Alexis briefly entertains the idea of giving head for money. The General Cleandro is their yelling, screaming boot camp sergeant and explains that humans can go for X amount of days without food and water before they die, but Spartans can go for longer and they don't die, they go into comas. And he does not explain how they regenerate from the comas. Regeneration is mentioned very briefly later on. Maybe it's like a normal amount of healing time, but they always recover fully. Anyway, like the regeneration process is never fully explained. But basically, torture school is what I'm going to call this. Torture school is basically just these kids have non-stop class in the cave, no breaks, no food, no water, no sleep, non-stop school until the teachers decide when there's a break for water, like literally can go for days and days. And this is where Augustus and Charon are apparently professors. Charon we'll see later is less of a professor in the traditional sense. He's more like the guy that stands around when the drills happen. Augustus is the actual professor in this case. And there's also a Professor Pine who seems nice, but Alexis thinks is a creep. But Alexis is good at math and everything seems to be going well for a while until a student is unable to answer a question and his mentor is summoned and they are forced to run the circuit. Run the circuit basically means that like whenever there's a punishment, whenever a student can't answer a question, the students, or basically whenever the professor decides to do it, it basically means that they are forced to run up the mountain, run down the mountain, swim over the river, and back to school. And the river is called the River Styx, but it's not literally the River Styx from Greek mythology. It's just a river called the River Styx. Anyway, so whenever I say run the circuit, it's basically a punishment to run up the mountain, run down the mountain, and through the river. Also, I should mention that Nyx is still here, the invisible snake friend, and Alexis complains to her like, hey, you're heavy, can you get off my neck? But Nyx refuses to get off her neck. And I thought, oh, this is the part where Alexis will be stronger than everyone else because she's doing resistance training with her invisible snake friend. That does not come up later. And all of her classmates call her stupid and ugly. Finally, we get to chapter 9, and I was gonna raise a bit of a hubbub about a kid named Christos Zeus. So basically the gods' names are surnames here. Christos Zeus, another half Spartan in her class. I was gonna bring up a hubbub about Christos because Christos is one of the names of Jesus Christ, but Christos was a regular Greek name before Jesus used it, so. So they're running the circuit up the mountain, now they're coming down the mountain and they have to swim across the river, and it's here, and Charon is basically the ferryman, not really. He just floats around in his boat on the river to just, I guess, monitor kids or like whack kids who aren't strong enough for the circuit. He's not really given a proper description here, but the way he was described here was just generally like tall and broad-shouldered and wearing a black cloak, because creatures have to wear black cloaks. It's not stated if it's mandatory, but they all have to wear black creature cloaks to signify their status, and Charon is half creature. But I just kept thinking of my man Charon from Supergiant. If you think it could be Siri's asked me to call emergency services or someone you trust. Oh my god, Siri knows what I'm doing. No, I'm not kidding. I did actually make Charon from Supergiant's Hades game my lock screen because I'm too traumatized by this book. Siri, ignore that. Like, at the time I was reading this, pairing that description of Charon with, I forgot to mention that Patroclus is a black man here, and I also forgot to mention that Achilles is portrayed with a man bun. I just kept thinking of Supergiant Hades. I'm just over here like, I'd rather be playing that instead. But apparently Charon has a dungeon in his villa on Lake Como, Q Oceans 12.
How did you get by the laser field in the Great Hall?
So Christos is actually a nice kid, and like everyone else, thinks that Alexis is of House Zeus, and he's like, you know, we might be half siblings, you know, maybe we can team up and work together. And Alexis is like, okay, whatever. But she shakes hands with them, and note here that they're all bloodied up from running barefoot on the mountain. She shakes hands with them, and then when they're swimming across the river, all of a sudden Christos is drowning, and Alexis thinks that something or someone is pulling him down. She tries to save him, but eventually she gets pulled under. She has to break free and swim away. As she's swimming away, she sees Charon go up to Christos in his boat and touch him on the forehead, and Christos is torn to shreds from some invisible force. And Alexis is like, oh my god, this guy is evil and cruel. I will note to myself here in my notes, I do predict what happens in the end, so good for me. I'm really good at critical reading, but I won't spoil it now. And so finally, we are introduced to Augustus here as the magic teacher, basically. From the way he was described, I drew it. I had to draw it out. He's described with two-toned hair, black on one side, white on the other side, long hair. He's, I think, 30 or 31, and he has a scar over his cheekbone and black eyes and a red ruby-encrusted crown because he is the heir of House Ares. I read all that and I'm like, what DeviantArt emo OC got dropped in this book? And I drew it. I mean, I told myself I'd try to get better at drawing this year, and I don't think this is that bad. I also did end up drawing Charon. His face does get revealed later, and I just kept imagining him as the demon from Misfit High School protagonist, but he has like ice blue eyes. I tried to draw it with a blue pen, but that didn't really work. Also, he's also described with like a ruby encrusted crown because he's the heir of House Artemis, but I didn't really know what the crown looked like, so I gave him the laurel leaves, and I think I just drew Zagreus from Hades. But there is official art. I think Editor Me has been putting official art up here. I didn't find that out until after I finished the book, so hooray for me. And Augustus has an animal companion named Poco, like Pom Poco, like the Tanuki's big nut. So Augustus decides to ask Alexis this question out of nowhere. What is your opinion of women participating in the Crucible? The Crucible is Spartan War Academy. He waited for an answer. It's ... good? I shrugged, not sure what he even wanted me to say. Frankly, I'm not exactly sure what any of this even is. Augustus's congenial expression disappeared. Pure loathing twisted his features. So that bastard really had a sanctimonious daughter just like himself. You really think other women should be subjected to this test? Oh no, I'd definitely given the wrong answer. I opened my mouth to dispute it, but my mouth was dry. I was tongue-tied. Oh, that's... I struggled to speak. Not... What? Save your excuses, Augustus cut me off with his hand raised. Future generations will have to suffer because of your stunt. Have you thought of that? Or are you just selfish? Soulless black eyes bore through me. This will be explored upon later, but immediately my first impression of Augustus is ruined. Even though he introduces himself as the honorable professor, he immediately projects his insecurities about women's rights onto Alexis. And you know, No one ever thinks for a second, and like, okay, look, here's the thing. You do need a man and a woman to make a baby. But you know, has anyone ever thought that maybe the stupid culling game, the stupid initiation deathmatch is the reason why their population numbers are so low? You know, I wrote this in my notes, and I'll have you know that this is actually the reason for the real Sparta's decline. Basically, the way that real Spartan society worked at the time is that there were Spartans, the full-blooded Spartan citizens, and then there were the Periokoi, who were the middle class, not considered full citizens, and then there were the helots. They were kind of slaves, kind of just not full citizens. Basically a larger population of a subjugated people. And there were many factors to real Sparta's decline. You know, the usual natural disasters, wars lost. But there was a point in which there was a real worry that like the helot lower class citizens or non-citizens, the population would outnumber the full Spartan citizens. Here's the thing, like humans are basically a non-factor in this, and something that I also write in my notes in this chapter, Alexis mentions how Augustus teaches his class in Latin. My brain hurt as I tried to piece together the Latin words that were spoken in a random order and form them into sentences. It's a dead language for a reason. Someone needs to kill it again. Also, whoever invented it should be stabbed 23 times in the back. If it was a joke, I'm not laughing. And I have to be nitpicky here about the differences between a dead language and an extinct language. It was mentioned earlier that to study for her Spartan merit test, Alexis had to study Latin. So she knows Latin, especially enough to take a merit test. But the difference between a dead language and an extinct language is that the extinct language is more or less donezo, done for. I think there are ways to try and revive extinct languages through recordings and through documents, but a dead language isn't dead. It just means that no one is growing up with that language as their first native language. So you can still learn Latin as a second language. It's a dead language on the basis of it's never going to be anyone's first nowadays. Also, whoever invented it should have been stabbed 24 times in the back. Shut up. Shut up. You should be stabbed 24 times in the back. And of course, Augustus calls on her, but she gets it right, of course, and he insults her. So chapter 10 is finally something new, Charon's POV. And it's set a little bit back in time when Alexis and Christos are swimming through the river. He spends the first 4 pages of this chapter talking about how he'd rather be hunting titans, how much he hates Olympians, how much they think chthonics are too big and evil and powerful, and he needs to keep moving or else his demons are gonna come back to haunt him, and that's why he can't sleep, because he's an insomniac. He's a feral creature. Okay, Edward Cullen. I just want you to know that this is the part of the book where I started thinking about this really gory comic book series, American comic book series called Crossed. I won't put an image up there. And if you look up this American comic book series Crossed, please do so with the utmost of caution, because basically it's like the worst zombie apocalypse story you can ever think of, because these infected are homicidal maniacs who just do whatever they want and live by their darkest, worst impulses, and they do everything worse under the sun. So yeah, you know, when you start thinking about incredibly gory American horror comics, I'm not thinking about romance, and I'm not thinking about how hot this guy is. I'm thinking about Charon from Supergiant Hades and Supergiant Hades 2. Comparing this book to Crossed, and also thinking about what I know now from the rest of this series, is that I do enjoy a really good action movie, but what I don't enjoy is mindless action, or in this case, mindless violence. Let's say these chthonics, or maybe it's just this generation of chthonics in particular, have this urge and sense of violence and constant doling out of violence. It's kind of no wonder they're dying out. And I can't help but think about the purpose of hunting down these titans, because I don't really get the sense that these titans are a particular threat for Spartans. They're definitely a threat for humans, but they're not actually gods. The thing that I like about writing gods in stories is that commonly gods are reliant on the worship of humans to stay alive, to stay relevant, to stay in some sort of power. But since these Spartans are really just super powered immortal beings, they're not gods. So what incentive, what benefit do they get from dealing with Titans and helping humans? Is it just to get a godlike worship from them? I guess it's to try and obtain them from some sort of labor, just like the Helot population in real Sparta. But this isn't really explained. I don't know if it's going to be explained in the next one. And there's no discussion about how to stop the cause of Titans, about trying to find what the cause of Titans are. Anyway, back to Charon, is that he sees Alexis swimming across the river. He's immediately obsessed with her, talking about her golden hair and her wide, innocent eyes. And he explains that he was the one who was trying to take care of her while she was unconscious after the death match, and calls her a wild cat with intense energy despite being unconscious. I don't really understand. So it's unclear on purpose from Charon's POV at this point, but when he sees Alexis turning around to try and help Christos from drowning, he's thinking that she's the one doing it to him. And at this point, I was trying to piece together what Alexis's magic power was, or I was trying to find the clues to see who was the unreliable narrator. We do know later what this is all about, and we'll get there, but he gets a hard-on over this. Ew. When Charon goes to the drowning Christos, touches him on the forehead, he reveals that he also has invisible animal companions, and there are two hellhounds named Hell and Hound. These two hellhounds are the one that like rip Christos apart. And as Alexis is swimming away, Charon is saying, "Oh, I'm gonna devour her." Ew. And also in my notes here, I was talking about like, you know, remember the lady doctor saying earlier in the story that like, oh, Augustus and Charon are like literally diagnosed sociopaths. And I did do a bit of a deep dive on sociopaths and psychopaths and what's the difference. Look, I like a good sociopath story, so to speak, like Hannibal or Killing Eve. Those are stories that seek to delve deep into the psyche of the main characters. Why did they turn out this way? Sociopaths, to my knowledge and research, aren't born, they're made. Psychopaths presumably are the ones born that way. We do know from minor spoilers for Killing Eve and Hannibal, but there was a trigger event in their lives that made them turn out this way, a traumatic event in their lives. Whereas in this point of the story, I wrote down in my notes that Charon, Augustus, Patroclus, and Achilles are just immature, violent Sigma males. Even if by some miracle they embark on some sort of redemption arc, which I highly doubt because it's a dark romance TikTok book, it's going to have to be shitting gold for it to be worth it. Spoiler alert. No. There's nothing like that here. And again, talking about how immature the writing is, even though we're in Charon's POV, there's still the recurring writing style point of using parentheses to express sarcasm. So multiple times in the book, not just from what we've read so far, but also basically the rest of the book, Alexis and literally everybody else will like use parentheses to express sarcasm. Like for example, when she's in school, Alexis is like, my peers, parentheses, my enemies, like stuff like that. Stuff that's like something that like a 12-year-old listening to Evanescence would say. It's like, my peers are actually my enemies. They don't understand what goes on in my dark heart, how I'm actually living in the dark hole of emotion that no one will understand. So again, I'm going to keep saying it. There's a time and a place for levity. There's a time and a place for humor. There's a time and a place for being serious and being sincere about what the writing, what the story is trying to go for. Again, if there's a serious fight to the death between all 50 19-year-old kids, I don't want to have to think about her nipples because I'm more concerned about whether or not she's going to survive and if she has to kill. I don't want to have to think about clenching her buttocks when her foster parents are literally beating her up. You get what I'm going at here? Where my frustration with the story lies here? And as we go into chapter 11, I also wrote down in my notes, okay, is she trying to be a Wednesday Addams? Is she trying to be like a Daria? Because you know, like Wednesday Addams and Daria type characters are like the deadpan, sardonic types who call out bullshit when they see it. Admittedly, I didn't grow up watching Daria. I am a little bit more familiar with Wednesday Addams. But the thing about Wednesday Addams and revisiting her character a little bit is that she is supremely active in her own story, unlike Alexis, where she's just kind of dumped into places. Like the whole plot of the Wednesday Addams show would not happen if Wednesday Addams did not stick her nose into the mystery and was determined to seek out the answer the full way through. I need to finish this season. Whoops. And at least with Daria and my minimal research on Daria and what I know about her is that she calls bullshit out about society. And the thing about Alexis is that she likes to crack really juvenile jokes in her head. Anyway, back to Chapter 11 here. Augustus explains that female mutts can participate in the crucible. Female mutts as in female half-Spartans. But it's dishonorable for a full Spartan woman to participate in torture school, and it's better for them to just get snapped up in arranged marriages. They all grow up so cushy anyway. They won't be able to survive the crucible. It's so dishonorable for a full Spartan woman to even participate in the crucible. And here in my notes I'm like, but if the point of torture school is to earn immortality, then does that mean that Spartan women don't get immortality? They just get it automatically because they're women? I don't know how the immortality thing works. So he also explains what Spartans have to look forward to when they turn 20. They get immortality. Again, I don't know if they're like, if it's like an in time thing where like this age is when you stop aging. It's not explained here. He explains you get better, faster, stronger, smarter teleportation abilities, winnowing, and they have the ability to make binding oaths. There is like an oath limit, and I'm not sure how it works. So the oath limit isn't really well explained. I tried to figure it out and couldn't parse the language. So there's a 3 oath limit, but I'm not entirely clear if it means it's 3 oaths per person total, or if it's 3 oaths with one person. So, okay, let me try and get here. So Augustus speaks here. Both Spartans have to say the Latin words to cement an oath, and you can only have 3 bonds, the golden number, with a single person. He shook his head, but this is a relic of ancient days. Today, no one willfully binds themselves outside of Spartan marriages and animal protector bonds. Immortality is a dangerously long time to be stuck to a promise. That is why this new marriage law has everyone up in arms. Okay, so you can only have 3 bonds with a single person. Does that mean someone can bond with me 3 times? Or I can only have 3 bonds attached to me at 3 times? Or I can have 3 bonds attached to me, but could I give as many bonds out to as many people as possible as long as the other person doesn't have 3 bonds attached to them? I don't know. Because see, it's the keyword with. If it said you can only have 3 bonds per person, then I would say, oh, I can only have 3 agreements with, I don't know. Anyway, this is just the language here that like I'm losing my mind over for no reason. So Alexis gets a bathroom break and cries about Charlie, and Nyx is here to tell her to get it together, girl. She takes a test and she managed to win 4th place. By this point, she's been so heavily sleep deprived that she's hallucinating and delusional and talking nonsense, and she forgets her name. She forgets Nyx's name. She literally flops herself on the ground and calls herself a whale. Like, I'm not kidding. She spends like a full day being delusional about how she's actually like a beached whale. Augustus does the basic of courtesies and asks her how she is, but she's too wackadoodle to answer. Also noting here, again, she's barefoot, so she's been tracking blood everywhere this whole time. More tests. She runs the circuit one more time. Finally, Achilles and Patroclus pick her up and congratulate her for surviving 2 weeks already, and in her delirium she calls Achilles a good doggy and passes out. So the thing about how like torture school and mentors work is really stupid and unhelpful, because they spend 2 weeks in torture school straight through and then basically a weekend of mentor days. Achilles and Patroclus are terrible mentors, and they do not provide anything useful to Alexis at any point at all in this book, okay? If they applied for tenure, I would deny it. Chapter 12, Patroclus yells at her to wake up because she had been sleeping for 12 hours straight, and when she rightfully refuses to wake up, he picks her up and throws her into the sea because, of course, they have like a beautiful gigantic mansion that's up against the Ionian Sea. She panics and thinks that Charon is out to get her because, of course, she's traumatized from torture school, but when she realizes she's back at Patroclus's and Achilles' house, she just lies on her back in the sea and imagines getting hit by a truck so she can be free from this plane of existence. It was a little funny. Unfortunately, Patroclus wants her out of the ocean so they can talk strategy. They don't. He grabs her by the ankle, and Alexis, remember, is touch repulsed. So she's lying in the ocean, and Patroclus grabs her ankle. I can't lift my leg up this high. He grabs her by the ankle, and Alexis, touch repulsed, kicks him in the crotch. And she tries to flee, and Patroclus is furious, and she's like rightfully incredibly freaked out by this guy coming after her, but he's like he freaks her out, and then he's like, I'm not gonna actually attack you. Okay, and then this part is really weird. So the relationship between Alexis and food is portrayed incredibly weirdly. Of course, being starved for most of her childhood and living in a box homeless with her brother, I would imagine that her relationship food is perhaps kind of like very fraught at this point, but I didn't go on a wiki rabbit hole about the relationship abuse children have with food, but like, okay, this is really weird. So after Patroclus's stupid freakout thing, they go inside to have lunch or whatever. Alexis sees the food and gets emotional about it because she thinks about Charlie, who's still living in a cardboard box and who still doesn't know where she is. Of course, getting emotional over food is a fair response. Like, I was that scene from the anime Erased? But then she gorges herself on the food, like binge eats it, and then throws up the food because her stomach can't handle it. Like a refeeding syndrome kind of deal. So then she goes back to eating, thankfully slow this time, but she still eats a lot because Patroclus tells her that she needs to basically stock up on food so she can prepare herself for the next 2 weeks of torture school. That's not really how food works, but okay. Yeah, this was incredibly disgusting to read. I would have maybe liked a deeper exploration into this poor traumatized child's relationship with food, and after having been denied it for so long. And yeah, living in this luxurious house, Alexis does get a lot of complicated feelings, but the thing with the food is so weird. If she like explained it or like thought about it, why she's like this. I'd been denied food my whole life. I couldn't help myself from eating all this food when I saw it laid out in front of me. I would have been like, okay, they don't have therapy here. They're such an advanced society. They don't have therapy. I would have understood her a little better, but no, she's just gorging herself on this food, then throws it up. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So like, obviously maybe you shouldn't be reading this book if you have troubles with an eating disorder. And then she goes back to eating slowly, but she still eats a lot. Anyway, this is just so weird. It kind of comes up a little bit again every once in a while later when she's back in this house for weekends. It's so weird. It's kind of disgusting. I don't get it. So Alexis asks what the strategy is, and Patroclus says, how about fucking the other students? And of course Alexis says no. And then Patroclus gets mad and yells at her again that she's so weak and so powerless, she can't fight them, she can't kill them, so she might as well fuck them. And she said she'd rather die. And Patroclus is like, that can be arranged. And Alexis is like, do it. Palpatine voice, do it. But Patroclus digs in that these are the only 3 strategies that he and Achilles managed to survive the school by fighting everyone else and being the top dogs, and that since they were raised in the Spartan system, they were prepared for this, but abandoned half-Spartans only have the chance to survive if they have a crazy powerful ability, but Alexis is so weak and powerless, it's a surprise that she managed to survive this long. Now here's the part where Alexis is actually kind of smart, and she says, okay, well, if I don't survive the next session of school, then there goes your chance to be generals. And I think she's implying that she'll off herself at school, or she'll just let herself die if she doesn't get a different strategy plan. And again, and this is part of my notes, that I don't understand why Patroclus and Achilles want to be generals, because like all chthonics, I thought. All chthonics hate Olympians because Olympians don't understand how painful it is to be a chthonic and blah, blah, blah. But the way that I read into it was that they want the general promotion to earn some sort of respect because the chthonic houses and the Olympian houses are still under the umbrella of the Spartan Federation. But like, I was like, well, if let's say Alexis does fail, can they get another student and try again for the promotion? Is there another way to become a general? Yeah, this isn't explained, but Alexis suddenly feels so powerful because she finally learned the art of negotiation. And guess who shows up? Charon. Charon pops in like Nightcrawler because everybody can winnow, teleport in this world. And then for some reason, out of the blue, Patroclus is like, oh, are you here to commiserate about the new marriage law? But Charon says, I'm working on a loophole. And Alexis is like, oh my god, why is he looking at me? And then it's like, girl, it's because you're the loophole, you dumb idiot. Again, as I mentioned before, it's actually really nice that it's supremely normalized in the society for same-sex relationships. And when Karen says he's working on a loophole and Alexis is like, why is he looking at me? Patroclus is like, well, you can't marry any of us because we're on the no marry list. It's here in my notes that I said, if only the story were about only the 4 guys, preferably less violent and more emotionally developed in a big, squishy, loving polycule. Alas. And Charon says he's got his eye on someone and he's looking at Alexis. And Alexis is like, whoever he's thinking about should kill themselves. No joke, she literally says they should. And I'm like, bitch, that's you. And for a couple pages they talk about like, it's incredibly jock bro locker room type of conversation. Since Charon is a house heir and he's required to marry this year per law, he's just been getting babes and dudes launching themselves at him left and right, but he doesn't care about any of them because all they want is some chthonic dick. And the 3 of them, or I guess the 2 of them, because Achilles doesn't talk, they insult Olympians for being spoiled rich kids, and then they leave because Hades called them about a Titan sighting meeting. But before Alexis can relax, Charon comes back around like a horror movie jump scare and threatens Alexis not to let herself die so that Patroclus and Achilles won't lose their opportunity to become generals. And he says he will bring her back to life and torture her for all eternity, and if she steps out of line at all, he will torture her and have fun doing it.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Okay. He then says, I know you killed Christos, but Alexis was like, I didn't do it. And then he says, don't fucking lie to me. Don't play games with me. I know what you are. And I'm like, bro, I'm lost. And poor Alexis is lost too. And then he leaves and then she just spends the rest of the time going cuckoo bananas and thinking about Charlie. I think she's actually losing her mind. Okay, so here's a little part. Sometimes I cried in the water, sometimes I laughed. And once, parentheses, 3 separate times, I flipped my curls over so I looked like a founding father and pretended to give a revolutionary speech, but each time my speech was too good. Parentheses, the town sheriff shot me for insurrection and I flailed dramatically in the shower. Died, while my fellow rebels watched in horror, end parentheses. During the day, the feminine urge to lead a fictional revolt plagued me. At night, nightmares once again tore me to pieces. Okay. Look, if the feminine urge to start a revolution really caught hold of you, I think you should be the Joker. And you know what? Maybe it's that time of the night. I should be the Joker. I'm about ready. Here comes the feminine urge. I know it so well. To nurture the wounds my mother held. Ballerina bent under the weight of it all. What she done? Oh yeah. I look like the Crow. I thought about doing the full Lady Gaga Harley Quinn makeup, but I don't feel like it. Also, where's my setting spray? I give a shit. If it smudges, then I'll be even more beautifully goth emo. I am wearing a lip stain from Neko Yanin called Vladimir, the vampire lip stains, so. Alright, then we go to chapter 13. This is relatively short. She's back at torture school taking more tests, still getting high scores. And then Theros, the heir of House Zeus, comes in to demonstrate his Olympian power, which is an invincible shield he can maintain for up to 2 hours. He is kind of a peacock, and I was wondering if like maybe the chthonic guys were all right that Olympians were just spoiled pieces of shit, but I don't know. Honestly, I feel like people forget how powerful Olympians can be. Even Zeus, for all of his fuckboyness, can be quite frightening. During my preparation for this video, I did end up watching Chaos on Netflix, despite the fact that it's been canceled since October, so I've just been torturing myself, all because I wanted to see Jeff Goldblum as Zeus. I will say really quick about Chaos, it's a great show, and I'm supremely sad that I didn't watch it earlier, and also that it's been canceled. But also Jeff Goldblum, like, I thought he was just gonna play a real funny guy, but no, Zeus by the end of that season gets really scary. But in this book, we obviously have bias towards the chthonics because they're basically the bad boy mafia. Are we gonna get any nuance out of this world building? I highly doubt it. And throughout Theros' demonstration, Alexis suspecting that Augustus can read her mind. So she goes on for a whole page in internal italicized dialogue, thinking out loud at Augustus and then trying to gauge his reaction. I'll read a portion of it here. This literally lasts for a whole page. His smoldering dark eyes were still locked on mine accusingly. Italics, he can't know I spent the last meditation imagining Karl Gauss whispering sweet nothings to me while he proved the existence of algebra, ... right? He kept staring. I struggled to swallow. Italics. What if he's reading my mind right now? What if he's chthonic and his powers is mind control? What if he's chthonic? Wait, he is chthonic. Oh, I didn't realize until still. What? Okay. What if he's chthonic and his power is mind control? What if he's going to kill me for picturing Karl Gauss naked? What if he knows I'm imagining him in a dress because he's a raccoon mother? Look, the only reason that Poco is there is to be on Augustus's shoulder and eat his hair. He's literally there for no other reason except for that. He arched his brow. Can you ... hear me? I thought tentatively. He didn't look away. I wanted to throw up. That was definitely a yes. Squinting with concentration, I thought loudly, please don't take over my mind. The parameters of reality were bleeding around me. I continued my mental screaming, blink once if you can He looked away and I'm deflated with relief. Thank God he didn't blink, I'm in the clear. Then shame hit. I'd officially lost the plot. Just because we made eye contact didn't mean Augustus could read my mind. That was basically the whole page. They then go on for a lesson about sirens. And the thing with sirens is incredibly disappointing. They do show up later, but basically they just have big boobies and big dicks. And Alexis, in her continued delirium, draws a penis on her test. She still scores well, though. Finally getting up to chapter 14. Instead of leaving for break after 2 weeks of torture school, they are sentenced to 2 more straight weeks of torture school. And now Alexis has school bullies. Remember, every other kid in this class is a boy, except for Alexis. So in this class is the boy Alexis thought is chthonic from the deathmatch. His name is Drex Chen. He is a half Spartan, so I guess no one knows what his lineage is, but he is the mentee of Theros, the heir of House Zeus, and he proposes to Alexis to form an alliance since they're both the only half Spartans. He can help protect her from the bullies if she can help tutor him in math, but she refuses, basically stating every student for themselves. But when another student falls asleep during class, the whole class is punished by running the circuit again. And she gets insulted and bullied by the bullies some more. Every once in a while they go to the library for a study break and there's more bullying, and Alexis is thinking about all the witty comeback she can give, but she doesn't until the bully grabs her and Alexis, being touch repulsed, loses it. She loses it. She punches him. They fight. She knees him in the crotch. And then what's this? Here comes Alexis with the wooden chair. And then she throws the wooden chair over one of the bullies, hits the other chair on the other bully. And then another bully, because she has like 3 bullies, another bully is trying to go in, but then Drex comes in and defends her. And then finally the commotion dies down. Augustus comes in and he's like, if you guys are fighting in there, we're running the circuit again. And here I was thinking that like, oh, I don't understand why fighting isn't permitted. Because I guess I was comparing it to the to the war college that that's in Fourth Wing. Since they still, I guess, have to keep in mind their population issue despite letting 40 kids die in the death match. I don't know. They still have to keep some population around. I don't know. One of the bullies named Titus, he just says that a chair fell on him. And I guess it's because even he doesn't want to run the circuit again. And, you know, and like, even though there's like bruises on Alexis and another kid injured, Augustus is like, fine, but later he growls at Alexis for putting herself in danger and says that chthonics are extremely rare, but Alexis doesn't catch that he's actually talking about her, wink wink, and just thinks that like, oh, he's just looking out for his friends. Patroclus and Achilles is just looking out for them so they can become generals. And here's the part where I realize that Nyx is only here for one thing and one thing only, and it's to tell the reader how much sexual tension there is, which is supremely unhelpful, and if she was cut out of the story, nothing would change. So after Augustus growls at Alexis for putting herself in danger, Nyx, I guess, wakes up and she's like, "Wow, kid," Nyx hissed as she slithered up my body. "That was hot. Did you feel that tension? I can't breathe." "First, you're delusional," I whispered. "Second, you're a snake. Do you even have lungs?" Yes, snakes have lungs. Oh my god. Nyx hissed. "First, I do. Rude. Second, please. I'm a woman, and it's obvious that man wants to do depraved things to you. Thank Kronos, finally a worthy suitor. I was getting worried you were going to die a virgin. It would have been so embarrassing for our family's honor." I choked. What family honor? "Hey, what's wrong with celibacy?" I asked under my breath. "I told you, Karl Gass is the only man for me. You know this. Also, you've officially lost it. Augustus hates me." "I never said he didn't hate you," Nyx tightened around my throat. "That's obvious. That man loathes you. But that doesn't mean he doesn't want to murder you in bed, if you know what I mean." What is Nyx here for? Nyx is here to be the sassy best friend who talks about how hot the love interest is. Okay, so chapter 15 is Augustus's POV. This is going to be a continuing trend here with the structure of this plot. Augustus's POV takes place just at the start of the fight in the library, and he's able to hear the commotion from his office. So he goes on to check and he sees Alexis all busted up and the other kids all busted up, and he's like, "Why is she constantly causing problems?" And this whole chapter is him just projecting his insecurities about women's rights onto poor Alexis, because he has a little sister whose name is Helen, and she is the heiress of House Aphrodite. So this whole chapter is basically Augustus mad at Alexis because she said it's good for women to be able to participate in torture school, but Augustus, who has a sister complex, is like, women shouldn't have to go through torture school because it's dishonorable, and if Alexis makes it through torture school, then that means my little sister Helen could be forced to go through torture school. And I'm like, have you maybe considered that torture school is the problem and not Alexis? And literally he says here, "I don't fucking care if Aphrodite and Artemis said I wasn't progressive. It wasn't about women being as tough as men. It was about the fact that they shouldn't have to be. Spartan women were rare and needed to be protected at all costs. The future of our society depended on keeping them safe." Now Alexis's two colored eyes were wide as she stared down on the floor. And like, he does admit grudging respect when he realizes that Alexis was in a fight, but she was clearly here to make a statement about women in Sparta. Not on my watch. It was completely fucking unacceptable. Goes on and on about how, oh, Alexis is playing mind games. She just looks innocent, but there's something about her. She's delicate and innocent, but this is all a game, and he gets a hard-on over this, and he tells the other bullies, "Don't fucking touch Alexis." And it was here I started thinking about Anthemimia from Utena. The thing about Anthemimia from Utena is that she was a blank slate on purpose, and that's why the other duelists projected so much of their own insecurities onto her and took out their frustrations on her. But eventually Anthe learns to find herself again thanks to Utena. I think Alexis needs an Utena, and it's none of these guys. Anyway, Augustus reacts with jealousy when he sees Patroclus and Achilles pick her up for weekend time. He's like, "How dare they touch her so familiarly?" And I'm like, I'm gonna gag myself. And then he tells the other bullies is that Spartans don't hurt women. If you hurt her again, you go through me. I'll be honest with you, it was really giving I'm gonna protect the women whether they want to or not kind of vibes. So we get up to chapter 16. She's back in the weekend house. We are going going on and on and on. It's torture school, mentor weekend, torture school, mentor weekend. Patroclus asks her why she looks like shit because she broke her nose in that fight, and Alexis is literally in too much pain to answer. Charon appears, tells them what happened in the library. He resets her broken nose. Charon once again tells her not to put herself in danger. And he knows that she's just a little liar putting up a facade. And poor Alexis is like, dude, I'm not lying. And okay, this is a really weird part. So after she's like, I'm not lying. This is so stupid. She says, Charon, I swear it on my life. The heat dissipated as he abruptly pulled away. What did you just call me? Gasping for air, I needed a second to process what he had asked. Charon? I repeated his name with confusion. Italics. Is he playing mind games? My name is not Karen. He spat with vitriol, like I'd gravely insulted him. It's pronounced Ch-Aron. I narrowed my eyes. Okay, but it's spelled with a K. Say my name, he ordered. Now, Alexis. Charon? I muttered. Did you just say Karen again? What? No, I squinted. Wait, can you pronounce it again? Long fingers dug into my scalp, then he yanked my head back. He towered above me, torso close to my face, cruel ice blue eyes full of violent promises. Say Ch-Aron now. Charon. I swallowed thickly. Sorry, sir. He inhaled sharply. His chthonic eyes filmed over with blood. A streak of white hot something exploded in my lower stomach. The sensation was powerful and foreign, like it hadn't come from me. Are we getting hot and bothered over being called Karen?
Nix, you don't suppose Charon would hold it against me if we had a little fight? To the death, I mean.
That was so stupid. I was like doing a double take on what I was reading as I was reading it. And guess what the snake does? Talks about how hot it is. Oh my god. Holy crud, Nix hissed against my right ear. Wow, talk about a real mate. I haven't felt that type of energy around a man in ages. Although Augustus does have similar protective instincts. They're good men, Alexis. I choked. Were the good men in the room with us? That was funny. Hard no, he's a literal psychopath, I said in disbelief. Exactly, Nix hissed. He's driven and relentless. He's not one of those sissy boys today who don't even know how to kill. What'd it take? Italics. Whoever he loves will be protected for the rest of their lives, Nix sighed like it was romantic. He'd be... devoted, possessive, if you know what I mean. This is my Joker moment. And then I immediately fall down into crying. Look, here's the thing. Me and Alexis have the same reaction in which we are reacting with genuine fear and horror over this guy who is choking and resetting my nose and grabbing me by the hair. Okay, that is not sexy. I do not need a talking snake to try and justify how sexy it was. Like if something sad just happened, it's incredibly weak writing technique to be like, wow, that was sad. No, use your writing to show me how sad it was. Use the writing to show me the anger, to show me the attraction. I do not want a talking snake telling me every time something happens between Alexis and one of these horrifying Sigma males that it was actually sexually charged hot shit all along. After this, she carries an entire wheel of cheese back to her room, and then when she goes outside for a swim, she notices that there are photographers out in the distance, out in the landscape, hiding in the bushes, taking pictures of her. And she goes to tell Patroclus and Achilles is like signing this, like, we should string them up by their intestines and kill them. They like go out with their superpowers and kill the photographers and question one of the photographers, and the photographers were like, no one knows we were here. We just happened upon this because they were concerned about the location being compromised. And after questioning them, they get killed. And Charon literally licks the blood off his dagger. And then Alexis literally thinks that can't be sanitary. And then the last part of this chapter is actually sweet. Again, I'm giving credit where credit is due. Alexis is woken up in the middle of the night and goes out to her balcony to see Patroclus and Achilles having a moment outside where Patroclus is, let's say, pleasuring Achilles with his mouth. But it's actually really sweet because when they're done, Patroclus is like, I love you so much, and like looks as if he's trying to kiss Achilles, but Achilles, he can't because he has the muzzle on. And I'm like, this is actually really sweet because I'm a sucker for, you know, the tragic almosts. That's exactly why I really like Song of Achilles in the first place. If it were only about the two of them trying to make it in the society that's turned against them, that's forcing them to fight like monster zombie titans, that's a story I'm more interested in, not whatever this obsessive dark romance bullshit is. It was incredibly tender, this section, but then Alexis is like, Nyx, I think I get what you mean about violence being romantic. I don't really get it. Violence is not romantic. But that's the end of chapter 16. Going into chapter 17, it's the menagerie. So remember earlier we said that all Spartans are required to have an animal protector. The menagerie is where that bond happens. But for this chapter, it's just a get to know you session. It's not the official bonding moment. And basically, long story short, every animal hates Alexis except for this fluffy, small, white, misshapen dog that she names Fluffy Jr. Alexis grows attached to him like misfits gotta stick together kind of way. And it's obviously clear that perhaps Fluffy Jr. is some sort of super special secret animal. Because the thing is, menagerie is basically another word for zoo. So Fluffy Jr. was put here. He wasn't born here. I mean, I hope so, because that's what a menagerie is. But anyway, Alexis takes another test and she ranks number 1. And Augustus pulls her aside later about the upcoming symposium. Now, symposiums were kind of mentioned earlier. There's some sort of weekly party, I guess. It's not clear who hosts them or where exactly they take place. I guess they must take place in torture school, but that's not super, I don't really remember. He says that women aren't usually allowed to attend, but given Alexis's special circumstances, she has permission to go, and Zeus wants to talk to her, but Augustus doesn't want her to go. I was like, oh, it's because of the sirens, right? Because during the siren lesson, amongst the talk of the big boobies and big dicks, they also provide sexual services at the symposium. So obviously Augustus is thinking that like, oh, I don't want delicate, innocent Alexis to be around these sirens. But the thing about the symposium is that there's food. So Alexis is thinking about the food, but she doesn't say that. She just says, I think I want to go because it sounds delicious. And Augustus gets mad and he uses his mind powers. He can't read minds, but he can influence minds. We learn that more concretely later. But he's trying to use his mind powers on her to force her to change his mind. But she manages to fight back. Yeah, that's it. So finally, chapter 18 is the symposium. And you know, the thing about symposiums is that they used to mean something, man. No, the symposium is just an orgy. Okay, but before it turns into an orgy, Zeus comes up to talk to her. She's basically found a little booth to hide herself in and eat her cheese. He doesn't ask her who her non-Spartan parent is. He's like, I guess you're my kid. You have good grades and you have blonde hair, so maybe with some etiquette lessons you can have a place by my side. And Thero gives a bit of a side eye, and I'm a little bit like, yes, he's going to feel threatened by this small child. When they leave, Nyx calls Zeus a dick, and the sirens show up as the entertainment with their big badonkadonks and their huge wackadoodles. And look, here's the thing. Sirens are described with either avian or mermaid-like qualities. We have none of that here. They're just described as shiny and pastel-colored and beautiful people with big badoinkadoinks, and it's incredibly disappointing and very boring, but it devolves into an orgy. You know, symposiums used to be like convivial gatherings of lectures and learnings. This is an orgy. Wow, okay. Nyx is trying to hide Alexis's wide, delicate eyes from what she's seeing, even though she's been encouraging her to get dicked down by psychopaths this whole time. But Alexis is like, I'm almost 20, like, I can handle this, but whatever. And then they go on for a little bit like, but penises freak you out. And Alexis is like, yeah, they're weird, they look like sea cucumbers. And I'm convinced that this whole conversation is between two 13-year-olds and not almost 20-year-olds. During this, Alexis makes accidental eye contact with a lady siren, and she's like nervously laughing about being in this situation. And then the siren says, I think she's laughing at us. But then Alexis is like, no, I'm not laughing at you. But to Alexis's surprise, the siren is like, oh my God, you can understand me? And Alexis is like, yeah. And the siren is like, oh my god, I've always wanted to be able to talk to a siren, but we've never been able to understand each other. And look, here's the part where I'm again very confused. Okay, creatures, we don't get the names of any other creatures other than sirens. Like, I don't know if satyrs and nymphs and dryads are a thing here. It was mentioned earlier in the initial lesson on sirens that I thought sirens could understand Spartans, but Spartans could not speak to the sirens. But then it seems here, later we learned the lady siren's name is Lena, and it seems that Lena doesn't understand sirens, so I don't really know what the communication is like between sirens and Spartans, if they just straight up can't and have never understood each other. Like, what's the system here for sirens being the entertainment of this symposium? Because Alexis said they must be in servitude, but if they are or are not in servitude, then like, how does that work if they don't communicate with each other? Honestly, at the end of the day, I'm probably just overthinking this, and the sirens are just a type of species that are just constantly horny all the time. No interesting interspecies relationships there. The lady siren gathers all her friends and they play games together. They ask her all sorts of questions about the human world, like, oh, is it true humans are all sexually repressed prudes? And Alexis says no. So they ask, oh my god, how many people have you had sex with? And Alexis is like, well, I've never had sex before. And the sirens are like, oh my god, how can you choose to live such a boring and sad life? And I'm a little bit like, get me a gun. And the only male siren in this group is named Oron, and he is like, well, you want to do it with me? And she's like, no. And he's like, okay. They play a card game, which is actually with knives. I don't know how it works. There's a bit of a paragraph about the rules, but I skimmed through it. Whoever loses the round has to do a dare. And of course, Alexis is winning a couple of rounds because she's grabbing the knives at the sharp end and she's cutting herself on the knives, of course. Eventually, she does lose a round and is dared to strip because all of the sirens are naked. Alexis finds herself surprisingly willing to go through with this, and she's like, I feel so loopy and happy. The sirens explain, yeah, that's the ambrosia and all the food. It's basically a tasteless spice. They literally use the word tasteless spice, and I'm like, it's drugs. It's just drugs. It's ecstasy. It's cocaine. So Alexis is like having her happy trip, and she's like, okay. And then she begins to strip, do a little striptease. And during all this time, a piano has been playing, and the pianist has been kicking people off the piano because Alexis doesn't see who the pianist is, but spoiler alert, it's Charon or Charon. I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't care. I'll call him Karen because Karen is playing the piano. All of the hot dudes and babes are throwing themselves at him. Just imagine this visual. A guy playing the piano and just kicking people that are trying to climb up to him because they think he's so hot. That's like a Looney Tunes bit. As she's doing the striptease, piano stops playing and then it's revealed to be Charon. But Augustus gets there first, grabs her by the neck, and he's like, what are you doing? How dare you strip in public? You have no idea what you started. You infuriate me. And Lena is like, she doesn't know what's going on, but Alexis is her new best friend, and she's like, get your hands off her. Alexis tries to leave on her own, but the male siren Oron is escorting her out and touching her by the shoulders, which means that Augustus, in a fit of jealous rage, grabs Oron, throws him aside. How dare you touch her? Anyone who touches Alexis has to answer to me. Alexis is confused, and Augustus tells her to leave, but Lena is like, look, I don't know what's going on, but you shouldn't have to listen to a man who doesn't respect you. So Alexis is, suddenly empowered by the magic of girl power. And she's like, you know what? Actually, I won't leave. Which goes over with Augustus super well because he just throws her over his shoulder and leaves. And as they're leaving, because this is like Shrek, like carrying Fiona, I don't think it's Lena's. She watches another lady siren suddenly spasm and foam at the mouth and collapse as they're leaving. And Alexis is like, oh my god, what happened? We have to help her. But Augustus is like, there are doctors inside. As Augustus has her over his shoulder, Alexis is kicking and screaming, and she's like, let me go. Augustus is like, You have 1 hour of punishment, and if you kick me again, you'll get 1 more hour. And you know what? Should I even bother reading for the 3rd time about how Nyx thinks this is super hot, by the way? Yes, let's just do this. Okay. Kid, Nyx whispered as she clung to my upside down neck. I think Augustus is really into you, like really into you. I shook my head and breathed deeply. No way, I said softly. He hates me. Yes way, Nyx shivered. He's wild for you, practically savage. You're in deep shit, sister. This is way worse than I thought. He hates you so much that he wants to fight. In the bedroom. I choked. A manic bubble of laughter burst out of my throat and tears of despair streamed out of my eyes. Carl Gauss would never treat me like this, I whispered miserably. What happened to nice men who love math and treating a woman right? Nyx scoffed. They died out because they were pathetic and embarrassing losers. No woman wants a nerd. I do, I said. No, you just think you do, Nyx hissed. What you want is a real man who wants to slaughter for you. I shook my head. You need help. Tears dripped down my face. Well, you need to get digged down. I cried harder because it was official. My best friend was a perverted lunatic. It was all too much. I couldn't keep living like this. Yeah, so, you know, we're just gonna keep going with the snake being super duper helpful. Alright, so we're gonna try and speed through this before my battery dies once again. She passes out on Augustus's shoulder and wakes up in the library, tucked under a really nice blanket. Somehow the nice blanket will come back later. She opens her textbook to study and a letter slips out and it's a threat telling her to leave or else. And she does not think anything of this and puts the threat away, thinking it was a corny child's prank and probably one of her bullies. But she spots a wrapped present with her name on it and opens it to find Oron's body parts. She's horrified, of course, but she does not think it was Augustus who might have done it or any train of thought as to who the culprit might be for the letter and the present. She doesn't think about who it could possibly be or why. Because I don't know. But anyway, she just buries poor Oron's parts and comes back to see the rest of the students come back from the party. Drex says everybody was talking about her and Augustus after they left and about the siren who died. And Alexis thinks it's Oron, but Drex says it was a lady siren who might have been poisoned. Probably a chthonic trying to target an Olympian and she got the wrong drink. Then Alexis finally asks, well, how can you say that when you're chthonic? But Drex is like, well, I'm not chthonic. My power is super endurance. And Alexis is like, huh? So he's either lying to me or something else was killing those people at the death match. The chapter ends with Alexis tutoring Drex because after he defended her from the bullies. In that other chapter, she agreed to tutor him and this other kid named Maximum. Chapter 20 is now Charon's POV, and like all the other non-Alexis POV chapters, this takes place a little bit before in the previous chapter. This is back at the symposium. He is the pianist kicking people off his stage for being horny. He's watching Alexis with the sirens, particularly noting that the male siren is looking at Alexis with pure lust. And I'm just like, can't we just have one male character who isn't purely lusting after Alexis, please? Because here, look, when I read Oron, I thought he was just like the horny twink who was so laissez-faire about sex. When Alexis said, oh, I've never had sex before, he was just like being casually playful when he was like, you want to just do it with me? Because like, I thought it was just like the siren's innate sluttiness that made him offer to have sex with Alexis rather than any personal lusting after her. But he didn't push her in any case. Like she was just like, oh, no thank you. And he was like, okay, can't you just let me have one mermaid twink, please? Yeah, it's basically Charon's POV, the same thing. He watches her do the striptease. She's about to pull down her top and he stops playing the piano, but then Augustus gets to her first. It's here that we get like a better sense of Augustus's and Charon's relationship, that they are partners. He does say that they've shared partners in bed together and preferred being in threesomes together. There's no mention about their own tender loving gay sex, and that's a shame. But anyway, Charon is jerking himself off during this whole thing and thinks to himself that his plans need to be accelerated. So we get chapter 21, really powering through the rest of this now. Alexis is back at mentor weekend and it's late November. She talks about how she found this random skull sweatshirt in her room, and now it's hers now, and it's super soft. Unfortunately, the sweatshirt comes back later, and she hears a lady's voice in the house, and her ears perk up because she's like, there's never been a lady in this house before. When she gets inside, she finds a newspaper in the kitchen talking about Charon has been sending betrothal jewelry to someone, but no one knows who, and it's like the gossip tab. Everyone's talking about it. And there's also an article about her, about how she's like the up-and-coming prodigy claimed by House Zeus. And Helen comes in. Helen is the 16-year-old little sister of Augustus and the half-sister to Patroclus from her mom's side. And she goes over to Alexis and immediately gushes over her about how strong she is for withstanding torture school, and talks about how there's like no young women in Sparta anymore, and that the chthonic houses are stifling, but we're protective of each other. We don't learn in this chapter that she's 16, but it's revealed that she's 16 later, and like she does come off as like very ditzy and naive and just like girl power. And it does seem to be like she does live a pretty sheltered life, and is apparently the only woman that can be around the four main love interests. Unfortunately, they are. But when you think about it, if there are like almost no young women in Sparta, and Helen is the only frame of reference these four men have about women, then no wonder why are they treating her like shit? Oh my god, I don't get it. You have this young, ditzy, naive Helen, and then you suddenly have to interact with another woman. Like, I don't know how to quite word my thoughts on this, but you get what I mean? I don't know. Anyway, Alexis goes to bed, and she thinks she's losing her mind because she can hear voices. And I will mention here, she has been like kind of hearing voices like almost every night, and she thinks she's losing her mind. Unfortunately, the voices come back later, and like these are kind of just like throwaway lines, kind of mixed up in all the general craziness of the story. The next morning at breakfast, Alexis inhales a bunch of food like Kirby, while dainty little Helen is eating a date with a knife and fork. Alexis calls her cute, and I don't think this is derogatory based on how Alexis thinks of Helen later. Another point I can give towards this book is that there is no like girl on girl hate. Again, Alexis is constantly surrounded by boys and men, but when it comes to Alexis in particular, even though Helen comes off as like the ditzy, naive type, she doesn't really express any envy towards it. She's more like, yeah, you know what, like, you go girl, like, I'm glad that you live a life of luxury. She's back at torture school, and she's tutoring Drex and Maximum. And Maximum, he is I think he's the son of, I think it was Hera, and he's kind of comes off as like the annoying ADHD kid, but generally I thought he was a sweet child. And sits next to Alexis and just yaps her ear off. But when Augustus notices that Maximum has switched seats to sit closer to Alexis, he makes everybody run the circuit. Since we're in November going into December, it's cold. They're still barefoot. They're running barefoot up the mountain, swimming in the icy river. But a Titan appears on the circuit, and the school is supposed to be in this place called a protected zone. And again, Titans are like these high-powered, fast-running zombies. It kills one of her classmates as they're all trying to run away. It's closing in on Alexis until something invisible rams into it. I know what this is later. We'll get to that. But when the something invisible rams into it, Nyx launches herself onto the Titan to try and slow it down and tells Alexis to run away, but Alexis refuses to run away, and Nyx bites it, goes back to Alexis, but there's still not enough distance between her and the Titan, so Alexis picks up a rock and tries to bash its head with it, but then she loses her grip, and then the Titan's about to pounce on her until Charon shows up, pops it full of bullets, and then Nyx unhelpfully ruins the moment by calling him hot with a capital H. See, look, I'm trying to get engaged with this high tension scene, and then it's ruined by a sassy black snake calling him hot. Oh my god. Again, Charon is like, how dare you put yourself in danger, points a knife at her, and chokes her and yells her and begs at her for putting herself in danger, wasting chthonic life. Alexis still thinks they're talking about Achilles and Patroclus' promotion. This seems to be the last straw for Alexis's mental state. She goes into full triggered flashback mode, thinking about her abusive foster parents and does a full-on freeze and dissociation. And then finally, this seems to be the last straw for Karen to realize that women have feelings too. And he does a complete 180 in this moment when he realizes what's going on and apologizes to her. Wow. He apologizes to her. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? And asks for permission to touch her so that he can teleport them back to the Academy for medical attention. Alexis grants the permission. Patroclus is there. And then a doctor inspects Alexis's wounds. Back to the old bullshit again of touch or you die, because this is a male doctor. Somebody, it's not clear who, because like when Alexis gets into these like semi-lucid states, she's like, somebody said this and somebody said that. Alexis overhears that the doctor pulled down her shirt, and if they weren't standing in front of her, then everyone would have seen her boobies. So he's got to deal with it with a sharp knife. And then Alexis passes out and wakes us up in the library. Chapter 22 is Augustus's POV, once again, slightly earlier than the previous chapter. He leaves Alexis sleeping in the library, and he and Charon find the doctor who pulled down her shirt. And look, again, all the male characters suck. There is not one decent male character, except for Charlie. They take that doctor, teleport him into a dungeon. He begs for mercy while also admitting that he just wanted a peek of the boobies because there are so few Spartan women around and Alexis is just an abandoned, filthy half-mutt anyway. You know, I think I see the problem for Sparta's fertility problem. It's that no one has a sense of self-preservation because immortality has rotted their brains. I think my lighting is changed when I had to take a break for battery charging, but whatever. I'll change it in a second. Augustus, angry at usual, says that Alexis is more important than he could ever imagine and uses his mind powers to make the doctor tear at his own flesh. You know, now that I think about it, why do Spartans even need doctors if they're immortal and presumably no illnesses? I'm gonna think. I can't think too much about it. I've already wasted enough time as it is. Okay, fixed my lighting, and we're on to chapter 23. Charon is also here, and continuing right after chapter 22, he is also dealing with the toxic masculine urge to kill and offers to scatter the mutilated doctor's corpse pieces so he won't regenerate. But Augustus, the edgelord that he is, says not to because he wants to torture him slowly. Charon then reveals to Augustus that after the Titan attack, Alexis, quote-unquote, disappeared like he used to, and correctly deduces that someone must have hurt her in the past, not mentioning that he was the one who caused her to trigger the dissociation. So Charon is unsure of their plan, but Augustus is firm that they keep on track so that they can both protect Alexis. And I just did a lot of key mashing here in my notes, but just imagine a long groan from the bottom of my heart because they're going to protect poor Alexis whether she wants to or not. Okay, chapter 24. Towards the end, a lot of these chapters just get, they're not shorter, but they just have less stuff happen. Anyway, chapter 24. Alexis is back at torture school and it's time for the winnowing lesson, or the leaping lesson, or the teleportation lesson. Basically works like most other teleportation powers. You think about a place or a person, you teleport there with the activation word domus, which is a Latin word used to describe a specific type of Roman house. I think it's meant to signify like home. So Augustus asks, what does she see? Like a person or a place? Like, what do you consider home? And she says, Charlie, but she stops herself from revealing any more. Of course, Augustus angrily asks, who the fuck is Charlie? And she says, no one. And I should note here, and I did point it out in my notes as well, that Alexis is now just straight up in and out of dissociation. I think it's just I think at this point, perhaps even the author knows that just coming in and out of torture school is not really helping much with moving the passage of time to what is really important later on, which is the graduation. And she's just in and out of dissociation, like all of a sudden time passes and then she's here, and then all of a sudden time passes and then she's there. Augustus takes them back to the menagerie for more animal bonding time. He pulls Alexis aside and asks again, who's Charlie? And Alexis asks, why do you care? And he replies, because no other man is allowed to have you. Man, poor fucking Charlie, man. Charlie, this kid, Charlie Swan, all Charlies. Anyway, 2 full pages of Augustus demanding to know about Charlie, poor Alexis dissociating. Finally, he plonks her in the menagerie and says, stay right here. Do not move from this spot. Of course, she moves from that spot because she meets the little white dog again and names him Fluffy Jr. after the dog that she and Charlie adopted back in their trailer park cardboard box. Look, Fluffy Jr. is really not important. He's just a really dumb Disney animal sidekick. Just imagine a white dog that has the traits from the dog from Coco and a little bit of that chicken from Moana. Just imagine that. Multiple times in this chapter, he is choking himself on a stick, and then Alexis literally says, I had to perform CPR on this little dog. I don't get it. Augustus is back. He's mad because Alexis moved from that spot. Whatever, back to the library. She gets another threat letter. She doesn't dwell on it, doesn't tell any of her professors or mentors. She does the circuit again. She passes out. She's taken into a warm bathtub by Augustus. He calls her my dear in Latin. I forgot to mention also that Charon also has a pet name for her she calls her Carissima or Carissima. It means darling in Latin. Chapter 25. Now it's December. Now it's 1 more month until graduation. And it's here that Maximum, one of the students, mentions that the houses aren't happy that so many students have died this year. Only 3 die on average. So it's time for some math. Imagine with me this as you will. This is a race of people who are dealing with fertility problems. If they get lucky, a generation consists of about 50 kids coming of age. That number is then dwindled down to 10 after the initiation death fight, which means that is an 80% loss of life for this population dealing with loss. And then after that, if only 3 die on average in torture school, then that means at the end of the day, the new crop of emerging adults is 7 kids, which is an 86% loss of population for emerging adults. And then, spoiler alert, later on, because more kids died this year, only 5 students make it at the end, which is a 90% loss of life. That statistic is even worse than the 4th wing school. Oh my god, and everyone talks about fertility problems. No, you guys have a murder problem. Stop doing that.
Stop it.
Well, here's the thing. If they made a case about overpopulation problems in Spartan society, that would make more sense because these people are immortal and immortal for the rest of eternity until gods know when that's the end. They don't die. They fall into comas. We do not know any specific permanent death for Spartans. If they said, yeah, we can only allow 5 students per generation because we are a purely 100% immortal to the end of time species, and if they just let anybody be immortal, then the world would be rampant with overpopulation. But they don't make that case. They're just like, you're not strong enough? Well, then you don't earn the right to immortality. Alexis now officially bonds with Fluffy Jr. Hooray. Anyway, doesn't matter. Chapter 26. Finally, we're coming up to the end of this school year. It's just, I guess, just from the fall to the winter. That's the whole school term for torture school. She talks with Drex and Maximum about bonding with their animals and specifically notes like, how does it feel? Drex and Maximum say they felt the bond in their heads, but Alexis said she felt the bond in her chest and she wonders about that. Then they do another run of the circuit and Augustus only makes Fluffy Jr. run the circuit with her as his punishment, but Fluffy Jr. is having the time of his life in the snow. And by the way, Patroclus and Achilles are here running alongside her. It's not said, but maybe off-screen Charon told them as well about Alexis's disassociation episode, because now all of a sudden even Patroclus is nice to her. It's so weird. But yeah, he asks, hey, have you noticed anything weird about Augustus? And Alexis is like, no. He's always been mean to me. And he asks her, has he said anything weird or has he given you anything? And Alexis is like, no. So Patroclus pivots the topic and asks, hey, have you figured out your power yet? She thinks based on being able to talk to the sirens, she says, okay, I think my power is that I can talk to sentient creatures. And I thought he was being sarcastic when he literally says, wow, that's the least lame Olympian power I've ever heard. I thought he was being sarcastic. No, he's actually being genuine. This is the part where they do the complete 180 and I'm like, what? Am I reading the same book? So Alexis asks, well, actually, what is your power then? And he says that he can tell when people are lying when he's touching them. And turns out, again, because this is important for some reason, remember their weapons manufacturing company is called WSDL. Patroclus is L for liar, not S for sex. So then, continuing on with this random ass conversation, Alexis asks who he and Achilles know who they're going to marry when they turn 26. Note here, because they do talk about their ages at some point, that, okay, Augustus is 31. I forgot how old Charon is, and right now I think Patroclus is 21 and Achilles is 22. Feeling 22. Okay. She asks, hey, do you know who you're going to marry when you turn 26? And Patroclus says, oh, we don't know, but thank you for not coming on to Achilles. And Alexis is like, huh? And I'm like, huh? And Patroclus explains that he and Achilles are both bisexual and in a relationship together. Would have been nice to know this earlier. But no one else seems to respect their relationship, and everyone likes to come on to Achilles because they think the muzzle is so hot. And then Patroclus says, we're not usually interested in other people, but... And then Achilles stops him. But I know that out of nowhere, Patroclus is considering telling Alexis that they're willing to open up the relationship to her. And yes, that theory is basically confirmed later. After taking a nap in the library later, Alexis wakes up to see Maximum, who confesses that he likes her and thinks she's super cool and gives her a kiss. And Alexis thinks it's a nice kiss, but she's like, okay, I don't really feel much of anything. And then after the weekend, the class returns, but Maximum is not there. And his mentor says he's defected, he ran away. But Alexis doesn't believe that because graduation is right around the corner. And much to her horror, she finds a wrapped present in the library with Maximum's face parts inside, even though she's rightfully horrified. She does not tell anyone. She does not let her professors or mentors know. She just puts it aside, and that's it. That's it! Come on! Oron and Maximum, to my perspective, were perfectly decent guys, and they're killed. For what? Even if they were just more lustful men staring at Alexis with hungry eyes, what's the point? What's the point? That it's Augustus and Charon. That Augustus and Charon are stronger and they're willing to kill for her? No, they posed, to my perspective, no threat to Alexis whatsoever. If Alexis, let's say, were ever in genuine danger by somebody and they killed them for her in self-defense, I've been like, okay. But these were perfectly decent guys. Never even subtly hinted to me that they had nefarious ulterior motives towards her. Maximum was a child. I don't care that he was 19. He was a child. He had blue highlights in his hair and spoke like an ADHD 12-year-old. Chapter 27. Torture school is over without much fanfare. It's time for the initiation ball and the graduation ceremony the next day. Alexis and Helen have their makeover moment, and finally, not a sausage fest. Helen brings up the fact that Alexis is wearing a skull sweatshirt, and she's like, where did you get that from? And Alexis is like, I found it, it's mine. Helen then talks about how, I'm feeling so inspired that you've managed to survive torture school. I'm thinking, maybe I can do it too. And poor Alexis is like, maybe you shouldn't, but then Helen's like, oh. Alexis backtracks, is like, well, do whatever you want to do. Yeah, it's your choice. And this relationship, even though we're coming up towards the end and it's not really well explored yet, I'm hoping it can turn into something decent, like a support group for Alexis that doesn't involve men. But Helen is a chthonic heiress and she has dark powers, but we don't know what they are yet. She puts Alexis in a tight black dress with no bra. Literally, she uses the word serving absolute cunt. It's a masquerade ball, of course. It's full coverage masquerade to the point where Alexis explains that they even have voice modifiers, and Alexis gets a lion head. A guy in a wolf's head, who is obviously Charon, comes up and asks her to dance, and despite saying no multiple times, he forces her to dance. And then another guy in a wolf's head, which is Augustus this time, comes up behind her and they all dance, which is basically grinding on each other in the dance floor. And I think it's Augustus who asks her, why isn't she wearing the jewels? And she says she's poor. She doesn't have any jewels. But they say, you're not poor anymore. And she's like, what? So finally, Alexis snaps out from her horny stupor and is like, get off me. I'm out of here. And tries to kick the guy in front of her in the crotch. But then he holds her leg there between his thighs. And that's bizarrely funny. But she manages to break free. And then Helen comes up to her and says, oh my God, everybody was talking about you with those guys. Oh, by the way, your professor wants to talk to you. And it's Professor Pine, who has been completely irrelevant up until now. And I don't know if Professor Pine is another dude who wants to get into Alexis's pants. He literally cannot get a word in before he's interrupted by Charon, I think, who holds up a knife to his neck. Oh my God. And then finally there's an explosion and a guy in a jaguar mask grabs Alexis, but Helen jumps in with them as they all teleport away into a shed in the woods. And I think it's said here that Alexis and Helen are like teleported right into the restraints against the wall of the shed. Not that they pass out and then they're restrained. Anyway, the man in the jaguar mask says, oh, I warned you this would happen. And he takes off his mask to reveal that it's Thero. Chapter 28, he is the heir of House Zeus and he was the one behind the threatening letters. Of course, he says, oh my God, my status as heir was threatened by you, a mangy female half-Spartan. Turns out his shed is littered with the bones of other House Zeus progeny, and she realizes that Sparta doesn't have a fertility problem. They have a murder problem. And I'm like, yeah, girl, I've been saying that since you got here. And then Alexis asks him about the presents, but Thero denies the presents. Theros' plan is that since the shed is in an unprotected zone, he's going to leave them to be Titan food. Finally, Nyx is here because she's been here this whole time because she's part of an invisible snake race called Echidnas and attempts to attack Theros. But remember that it was established all the way back when that he has an invincible shield and the shield knocks Nyx out and Theros teleports away. Now, this is quite the harrowing callback to the first chapter. Alexis, back in chapter 1, when she first meets Nyx, had broken her own bones on purpose to slip out of the restraints that her foster parents tied her up in. And she does that again where she damages her hands to dislocate her thumbs and yank her hands out of the ropes to get her free. Helen, because she is of course a chthonic heiress, has a thigh holster with a knife in it and uses the knife, despite having broken hands, to cut Helen free. The Titan, just in time, breaks in to the shed and Alexis, in the nick of time, takes Helen and activates her teleportation powers. And it works. She teleports right into the Colosseum. Not the Colosseum in Rome, but the Dolomite Colosseum, and it's right at the graduation ceremony. I don't know what these people were doing while they were missing, but anyway, everybody's here. Charon and Augustus are at their side immediately. Poor Helen is sobbing. Charon is, of course, oh my God, who did this to you? Blah, 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 blah. This next part is actually pretty cool. Alexis ignores all that bullshit, points a bloody finger at Thero, who is at the graduation ceremony, and she charges at him, and then we go into chapter 29, Alexis actually being pretty cool for once. And it was talked about in his chapter. I thought that whole chapter about Theros like demonstrating his powers was kind of dumb, but it actually does come back later here. For some reason he gives his weak point away to a bunch of 19-year-olds, but he says in that demonstration that it's not as if the shield is up the whole time. He can maintain it for 2 hours and it has an activation window. He says, well, if anyone got into my shield in the activation window, then they are trapped in the shield with me. So Alexis, admittedly a badass in this moment as she is, charges at Thero, jumps into the shield with him in the activation window and starts choking him with her bloody hands. And Theros is like, think about house honor. And she's just like, I grew up homeless, you prick. Theros manages to break free. He tries to choke her, but then all of a sudden he's reeling in pain and foaming at the mouth, and the shield breaks and Patroclus swoops in and tells Alexis to let him go. And this is where my theory actually came up because I predicted this would happen. She doesn't understand. He makes her calm down. Theros is released from the spell. He calls her a monster, but Hades comes down and demands an explanation. And Patroclus explains that Alexis and Helen went missing at the party. It's shown here that apparently Theros did not know that the the other girl he kidnapped was the heiress of House Aphrodite, which is, you know, incredibly stupid. Apparently, it's such an advanced society that they don't have computers, advanced paternity tests, or even portraits of people who are on the same high status as. Anyway, Patroclus, I don't know how he knows all this. I only assume that Helen told him. Patroclus tells Hades that Pharaoh kidnapped him. Alexis saved Helen and let them away and confronted Theros for kidnapping them. And he reveals that Alexis's eyes turned blood red, which is a sign that she's chthonic. Apparently, I guess she can't tell when her own eyes turn red. Patroclus believes that her power is to cause other people pain with her blood, which proves my theory that I suspected this whole time. And Patroclus says she must be a full-blooded chthonic heiress and thanks her for saving Helen, and the whole crowd cheers for her. Poor Alexis is reeling from the fact that she is directly responsible for the deaths of multiple people. It wasn't an invisible titan who killed her foster mother. It was her because they were fighting with bloody fists. She was the one who caused the mysterious deaths at the death match when she thought it was Drax who did it. She shook bloody hands with Christos and accidentally caused him to die when they were swimming across the river. And at the symposium when they were playing with knives, somehow that other lady siren cut her hand on the game knife that Alexis also cut her hand on. Anyway, it's very unsanitary. But turns out the chest pain that Alexis had been mistaking for panic this whole time was actually her chthonic powers activating. And Alexis is still thinking about that Father John and how her soul is going to hell. And understandably, she is questioning how she can live with herself after realizing she is responsible for the deaths of multiple people. And Hades puts two and two together and turns to Zeus and said, "You said she was dead. You knew for a fact that the Titans killed her." So Zeus asks Patroclus to summon a guy named Vico from the crowd. I guess he was in the crowd. And using Patroclus's lie detection powers, Oh my god. Even the whiteboard can't handle this anymore. Okay, stay here. We're almost done. So Vico explains 19 years ago that there was a Titan attack at the house of Zeus, and he grabbed Hades' daughter, Hercules, and fled with her, but passed out and woke up to find the baby gone and assumed that she died because she was a widow baby in the wild. And Patroclus confirms that he's telling the truth. But Alexis, throughout the story, she did mention before how she has this scar on her chest, and she thinks, no, I don't think he's telling the whole truth, and I think someone must have tried to stab me. All the way in chapter 1, Alexis did mention that she was found with a baby blanket, and that baby blanket had a name embroidered on it, Hercules. So Hades and Persephone rush down to sweep up Alexis in her arms because turns out she is their long lost daughter, Hercules, and Alexis is tearing up about it, very emotional. And of course the moment is ruined by Zeus because he says, an heiress has been made to suffer through torture academy. Her honor is ruined. How about a marriage? How about a marriage to tie things up real nice? They think, oh, whoa, are you trying to imply that you're gonna marry Alexis to your son who kidnapped her? And he's like, no. Is anyone willing to marry Alexis to save her honor? And she's like, why are we dishonored? Because we were kidnapped? Like, and she's rightfully so says, like, these Spartan laws are archaic and psychotic. And of course, Persephone's like, my daughter is injured. Back off, you fiends. But guess who steps up to the plate? It's Charon. And Charon says, she and I are betrothed to him and his partner. Yes, I called it that. Those boxes of body parts were from Charon and Augustus. The body parts were considered symbols of protection. And there was, I did have to scroll back, there was a throwaway line about something shiny underneath the body parts, but Alexis was too horrified to find out. And turns out those were the jewels that Augustus mentioned during the party. Those were heirlooms that she didn't get to open because she was rightfully horrified by the body parts. And the third part of the betrothal courting process is that she wears gifts given to them. So that blanket and that sweatshirt that she just found turns out was from them, and because she'd been wearing and using them, that is considered an acceptance of their betrothal. So in this moment, Alexis realizes that ever since the day Charon saw Christos die in the lake, he knew that she was chthonic because he must have seen her eyes turn blood red that day. And because he knew that she'd be ignorant of Spartan marriage techniques, methods, rituals, that in her ignorance, he can manipulate her into accepting the Spartan betrothal. And Charon says, hey, she accepted it and you guys can't interfere. And everyone's like, oh my God. And Alexis, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, I did do all that. Even though I guess Spartan laws don't account for non-knowledge of these Anyway, so Zeus asks, well, who's the other guy you're talking about? And to nobody's surprise, it's Augustus. But then Zeus is like, but the no marry list. But then Charon is like, the law states that we can't marry anyone on the list, but Alexis is not on the list, so we're still following the law. And then Zeus is like, well, she is chthonic, so she has to join the Assembly of Death, the Titan slaying team, and she must participate in the gladiator games next year. Despite everyone's protests, Alexis is like, oh fuck, I'll do it. And Zeus was kind of about to give her an out. It's like, well, maybe we can do some like, well, actually there's a bylaw. And she's like, no, I'll do it. Fuck this noise. Because Charon and Augustus were also against her participating in the gladiator games and joining the Titan slaying team, she's like, fuck you guys, I'm doing it. So she notices that Augustus and Charon overhear her mother, like once all this is over, they overhear her mother asking her, it's like, what is with your white eye? Like you didn't have that when you were a baby. But Alexis is like, everybody back off. And she teleports away. Chapter 30. Finally, she teleports back to Montana to her cardboard box home to Charlie. And she manages to find him. They have this tearful reunion. She apologizes for leaving him. Charlie turns out has been following the news, like them explaining how she's like a long lost female Spartan and wanted to find her, but because this is a dystopia, actually, there's no longer any transatlantic travel. Because remember, she was in Italy this whole time, like northern Italy, and he's still in Montana. And also their dog Fluffy died. Oh no. Reminder that Alexis is still bleeding from her broken hands, but she and Charlie spend the night in their beloved cardboard box until the next morning, the four compadres show up. Patroclus, Achilles, and Augustus and Charon show up, and they're like, why are you in a cardboard box? Who is this? And Alexis is like, this is my brother Charlie, and if you do anything to him, I will kill everyone in this room and then myself. And Augustus once again scoops her over her shoulder. She flies into a fury, saying that she refuses to leave Charlie behind. I don't know when they find out, like, I don't know, like, what, like, sleeper network they have, like, spying on Charlie, but Patroclus says, hey, look, we knew about your brother. He doesn't say how long they've known that she'd had a brother, but she's like, we've always planned to take him back with us. And Charon asks, so you guys aren't blood related? And she's like, he's my brother, you little shit. And Charon is like, if you run away from us again, we'll chain you to our bed.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine.
And they're all teleport away. So finally, chapter 31, Alexis and her dreaded wedding, a seemingly Christian-like white dress walk down the aisle style wedding. Hades and Persephone are trying to be encouraging. There is a pair of male twins next to Hades. I don't know if this will come up later. It's like it's one line mentioning these twins. No time for introduction in between her being picked up and her at this wedding. During this time, it's explained that Thero mysteriously disappeared, so maybe he'll come back later. She's walking down the aisle. Patroclus is looking angry. Achilles is physically holding him back. Poor Charlie is there. Poor Helen is there, still looking a bit worse for wear ever since the kidnapping attempt. And Fluffy Jr. has grown 3 sizes, and Nyx is there too. Charon and Augustus are looking spruced up. She's not buying it. Turns out the officiant is the white-haired, violet-eyed Fate Lady, who tells Alexis that she's glad she took a chance on the killers. Alexis, Charon, and Augustus have nearly 2 full pages of a enraged whisper conversation in front of this poor officiant. Finally, she commences the ceremony with magic Latin words that seal the deal of the bond of marriage, and they exchange rings. Really, Augustus and Charon just give like these bracelet ring chain thingies to Alexis, which sound really gaudy, and Finally, the Fate Lady's like, okay, I'll leave so you can kiss. And Alexis is like, what? Why are you leaving? So Charon demands that everyone leaves the church or whatever, and Achilles drags a resisting Patroclus away, and poor Charlie follows them. And again, because Spartans seem to have no sense of self-preservation, probably because immortality has rotted their brain, one guy cheekily decides to stay behind because, according to Spartan law, anyone who wants to stay to witness the marriage kiss can do so. But, of course, Augustus uses his mind powers to make the man bleed from his eyes and his ears and his nose and forces him to also leave the church. And Alexis is cornered by two men at the altar. Chapter 32 is quite short. It's from Patroclus's POV. And Patroclus and Achilles are back in their room, and Patroclus is furious for not staying because he knows that Alexis doesn't really want to marry them. Turns out he doesn't hate her after all, despite the insults and cruelty and rudeness to her. Okay. And Achilles signs to Patroclus that they should take her back from Augustus and Charon. She's already ours. She just doesn't know it yet. They weren't even good mentors. They didn't even give her any proper strategies, any lesson plans, any tutoring on the side. None of that. None of that. Anyway, that was a short chapter. Chapter 33 is back to poor Alexis being sandwiched between Charon and Augustus on the altar. Charon asks, can he kiss the bride? And poor Alexis is like, well, she knows what's really going to happen. And she's like, well, I have nothing left to lose. This is just a game to them. And actually, I need a distraction from the fact that I'm actually a serial killer. So she says yes. I wouldn't consider this enthusiastic consent. I would consider this begrudging consent. Anyway, by kissing, Charon gets down on his knees and pleasures her with his mouth and fingers. Augustus is behind her, fondling her and also kissing her. And remember that 1 hour punishment from a couple chapters ago? Yeah, now she has to endure for 1 hour before she can come. Which is really stupid. Like, presumably she's never touched herself before. Asking a complete newbie to be completely fine with edging for 1 hour is asking a lot, honestly. It's not even that high up on the kink list in my opinion, but I digress. The hour passes instantly. It doesn't really matter. They switch places. She reaches her climax, notices finally that Charon has hellhound companions that were invisible up until now, but because they're touching each other, he can't allow her to see them. And Alexis asks, well, what are they saying? But then Charon's like, they don't really say anything, they just have their animal noises. But Alexis knows, because she can speak to beasts and creatures, I guess, that those hellhounds had been following her this whole time. And that the voices that she'd been hearing this whole time, making her think she'd been going crazy, were those two invisible hellhounds that have been stalking her this whole time. And that Charon, through his hellhound companions named Hell and Hound, like he's a Disney villain, has been stalking her this whole time. And Alexis, freaked out by this revelation, demands to be let go. But no, they're gonna keep her there because they'll never let her go. And she passes out. Oh god, we're really going towards the end. Okay, so this is really stupid. Chapter 34 is basically a repeat of chapter 10, the first time we got Charon's POV, all the way back when he watches Christos drown in the river. And it's basically a more honest account of what really happened at the river, where Charon observes that he sees Alexis's eyes going red. Everything clicks together. He realizes she must be chthonic. He realizes that she's the loophole that he's been looking for this whole time, so he doesn't have to marry a simpering, spoiled Olympian brat. And the whole plan is laid out. He knows that because she was abandoned in the human world, she doesn't know about Spartan marriage customs, and he sets his invisible hellhounds on her, and he can see what they see, and he literally says the stalking has begun.
They ask you how you are, you say that you're fine, when you're not, really you're not.
Okay, chapter 35, Augustus, POV, really short. Augustus bridal carrying Alexis to their new home alongside Charon. He actually has the decent sense to know that Alexis didn't want this marriage, but he's still like, I'm going to learn all her secrets and find out where her scars are from and slaughter people over it, and there was no way she was leaving them. Yeah, because at some point during the wedding, they find her old scars from when she was abused in her foster family, and they're like, who did this to you? And I'm like, oh my god, they're dead, shut up. I want to get out of here. Finally, chapter 36 is the last chapter, and it's really short. Alexis wakes up in some sort of sleep paralysis state next to her new husbands who are snoring next to her, and she swears that they'll pay for tricking her. There are consequences for marrying a monster. And with that, it's finally over. Except, actually, psych, there's one more chapter, exclusive bonus scene. And look, actually, I will say, again, credit where credit is due. There are some gold nuggets in this pile. The exclusive bonus scene is Hades and Persephone, and it's set before the wedding. Persephone is concerned about their daughter. They just got her back, but she's been lying in front of the fireplace, not speaking to anyone, with black tape over her eyes and mouth. And Persephone is like, well, you know, her father also went non-speaking for a while in situations like this. So she asks Hades, like, hey, we just got our daughter back. I'm concerned about her. There's this wedding coming up. Is there anything you can do to help her out? And Hades is like, my daughter is perfect. But he goes up to her and is like, hey, daughter, I know things are crazy right now, but you want to wear my helmet that has no eyes and mouth holes and completely blocks out sight and sound? And she's like... And poor Persephone, mother's duress, is watching Alexis and Hades have fun while Alexis is wearing this indestructible, eyeless, mouthless helmet, and Hades is like smashing stuff on it to prove how indestructible it is. And she just laments that she just gave birth to a girl version of Hades. It's a very like what a girl wants meets Adam families type of scene, and I actually thought it was really funny. And I'm actually kind of glad that my lasting impression of this book ends on a somewhat positive note. But alas, we're not doing that. Look, I'll be real with you. Finally, we're at the end. I can talk about my feelings about this. Look, even though I do talk about the high points of this book, because again, credit where credit is due, at the end of the day, I gave this book a 1 star because just like the poor initiates during this initiation death match, about 90% of this book is dead to me. Only about 10, you know what, not even 10, maybe more like 2 to 3% of this book that I actually genuinely enjoyed. And okay, right, before I forget, let me explain this WSDL thing, because while she's being pleasured at the altar, they do explain this for some reason. So L for liar, D for death, and that's for Achilles because he's the son of Ares. And then turns out Charon is the S for sex, and then Augustus is the W for war because he's also a son of Ares. Anyway, that doesn't even matter. That's just something that happens in the book. And that just goes to show. The thing about this book is that it's just filled with a lot of superfluous, trivial details that don't really matter. I don't care that they have like special initials for their weapons manufacturing company that we never actually see. And okay, just to finally wrap this up, because this is a process that has taken so long, and Editor Grace will certainly be mad at me, and certainly this video will not come out before 2024 ends. Let's just get right into it. There are some good points in this book. Like I said, there's good action scenes, but the problem is that the action is ruined by the unnecessary points of gross humor, buttocks, nipples, lips, parentheses, vaginal. But look, every once in a while, where the humor fits, it fits really well. It gets a chuckle out of me sometimes. But again, like, the humor is ruined by it being incredibly juvenile humor, incredibly emo kid versus the army of posers type humor. So like, when I talk about these good points, I don't mean that they are good points throughout the whole book. There are just certain points in the book where it goes well. Overall, it's just a lot of muck, and every once in a while I get a tiny gold nugget. Like the action scenes, when I was getting into the groove of them, were good. The humor every once in a while perked me up. The exclusive bonus scene is actually really funny, but that's it. Everything else is just kind of a mess, to be honest. So we get to the bad, or the part, not bad, like the parts that needs to be worked on, okay? And I guess since this is supposed to be a romance, then what really needs the most work is the characters. So here's the thing. I am getting really tired of dark romance. And the thing is, I don't read them, which is great. But the problem is that I do end up hearing a lot about them because I am, despite not on Book Talk, I am still in the bookish spaces, particularly on YouTube. I don't want to be the type of guy who says you shouldn't be reading this because if you enjoy it, that is well within your prerogative. You're allowed to enjoy garbage. But as a reviewer, feel in my heart to tell you sincerely that this is just straight up bad literature. When we talk about our main character, Alexis, she is incredibly juvenile, speaks like an emo kid from the early 2000s talking about how much the posers need to die. She does not read as a 19-year-old, she reads as a 16-year-old, if I'm being generous. Most of the time she reads like how I was when I was 13, still listening to Evanescence and discovering 3 Days Grace and Breaking Benjamin. And I feel like this is a common, a common occurrence between a lot of dark romances, is that they like to have their female main characters very young. She is 19 in this. I'll be honest with you, I do not consider myself an adult at 19. Just speaking on maturity lines, everybody matures at a different rate. In my personal experience, I don't feel like I changed much between 17, 18, 19. And to be honest, Alexis, suffering through so much at a young age, you can say that she probably uses humor to cope with her trauma, but there is no deeper exploration into her trauma here. Like when she sees all the food, she gets emotional over it, but she also binge eats. What is up with that? And I would think when I read other stories about severe trauma in childhood, particularly my main point of reference is the Foxhole Court. Now, the Foxhole Court has a lot of criticisms of its own, but in their case, those characters are very much on their guard at all times, always ready for a plan to escape a bad situation. Alexis, sure, she does feel like she has no way to escape when she is stuck with Achilles and Patroclus in their house in Greece or whatever it is. But even still, despite being a math prodigy, despite being incredibly book smart, because of her disciplined self-studying in order to make a better life for her and Charlie, she is not very smart. It takes her quite a bit of time to realize that she has a way to negotiate with Patroclus and Achilles, and she could have used that leverage of being their mentee, being that her success and their success hinges on her survival. She doesn't use that to her advantage until later, and even then that doesn't go anywhere in order to make life better for herself. Trauma works differently for different people. I am not in any way, shape, or form an expert on trauma. You could say that like her immature way of thinking and her sassy comebacks, again, is some sort of coping mechanism from the trauma. But to be honest, the way that I understand trauma and the way that I understand depression and dealing with mental health is that it actually causes the brain to age faster. So consider me in a little bit of disbelief into not liking Alexis and all of her immature little gimmicks and quirks and stuff like that. If there was something about her being autistic coded, maybe that could have been something, but I'm not seeing it. I'm just here being really annoyed at the constant referral to late 19th century German mathematician Karl Gauss and early 20th century German mathematician Emmy Noether. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing those names correctly. That's just speaking on my many problems with Alexis here. I could probably go on and on about it, but speaking on briefly into these other characters, I don't even know what they are because they do complete 180s towards the end of this book. There is no consistent character arc from starting out cruelly, making misconceptions about her, realizing that they're wrong, and then working to become better people. No, it is literally a 180, like in that chapter when she's attacked by the Titans towards the end of the book that they suddenly do a 180. Because for some reason, Alexis never tells them that she was growing up in an abusive foster home, that she grew up in a cardboard box. I don't understand. She never gives a reason why she doesn't tell them her backstory. Every time, Patroclus in particular, because Achilles doesn't talk, he's basically a non-factor here for the moment, other than his constant need to kill people. Patroclus constantly is cruel to her, tells her she stinks, tells her she's ugly, tells her she's weak, she's powerless. Alexis is just swallowing all of this. Here's the thing. What I think maybe the story was going for is that Alexis will show them. She may not be saying anything now, but she'll show them that she's powerful. That's stupid. I'm here now, and all I'm seeing is this guy treating this girl incredibly cruelly despite being assigned her mentor. Despite that, his promotion is hinging on her success. And if at any point Alexis mentions anything earlier about the fact that she's not like a sheltered human girl, she's not playing games about faking anything or faking ignorance or faking or whatever their projections of her, of what they think she is onto her. Like multiple times when they first meet, Patroclus is like, oh my god, you're a sheltered, stupid, weak girl who grew up in the human world. And Alexis was like, my foster parents tied me up to a pole out in the yard and I broke my own thumbs to get out of it. I took care of my little brother for 8 years, living in a cardboard box while we scrapped on food vouchers and worked hard to survive through the winters in Montana. At any point, she could have showed him, and that could have been a very empowering moment for her where she stands up for herself against this guy. And then Patroclus could realize the error of his ways and work on a redemption arc. None of that happens. None of that happens. My poor whiteboard is like, let me out of here, let me be done. But no, now we have to talk about Augustus and Charon. I have no idea what their problem is. I do not like them. They are not good characters. There is no arc here. There is no deeper I don't know what I'm going with this. There is no deeper exploration into their characters. There is like a little nugget with Charon in that scene where they were torturing that stupid doctor. Like Charon, he is the son of Artemis and the son of Erebus, and Erebus in this world is like part creature of some kind. It is said at some point that Charon himself used to dissociate. What's up with that, Chief? Where did that come from? How come you dissociate? Never is explained. He is just a horny, violent badass with guns strapped here, and here. He's obsessed with Alexis from the moment he sees her for no reason whatsoever other than his perceived misconception of her innocence, of her delicateness. Same with Augustus, who has serious anger issues, serious issues about his ideas of the rights for women, where he believes that women need to protect it at all costs, parentheses, whether they want to or not. And oh, you could say, but oh, he just wants to protect the women because women are so scarce. Well, hey, look, this is an immortal society. Why is low population such a problem here? Because they don't die. Sure, there's like 100 Spartans, but the leaders of all the houses are still fine. There's no like, oh my god, the house leader is missing and we don't have an heir. I don't feel the sense of urgency for this trying to solve the fertility problem. Like, I can understand why people are talking about it now in our society as the human population lives for longer. We're going to have more people who are above retirement age, where there's less of a young population to take care of them. Consider South Korea, where I think they projected that by like, what was it, by 2050, there's going to be like 20 million people left in Korea, and that of those people, 10 million are going to be 65 and older. It was something like that. Like, that's an issue. That's why Korea has spent so much time and energy and money trying to solve a birth rate crisis. But here, again, the Spartans are all immortals with superpowers who don't die, who do not have a weakness at all. And again, that's why the Spartans are incredibly boring as like a concept for a superpowered race. The thing about immortality that I find fascinating is that it's a scam. But also, other than that, what I find more interesting is immortality with a very specific weakness. There's a reason why, like, you know, it's exciting to have even like a fierce vampire or like a superpowered werewolf have to deal with their one weakness, to have even Superman deal with his weakness of kryptonite. But for now, we have no perceived weaknesses of Spartans. We've had so much page time dedicated to nothing. Alexis goes to torture school, she comes back from torture school. She goes to torture school again, she goes back for the weekend. All the while she's getting insulted, getting bullied, treated poorly, thrown around, misconcepted, having other people's insecurities projected onto her. I wish that my ideas that I mentioned earlier about Jesus Christ existing in this world were actually in this book. I feel like that would have made it more interesting. Honestly, the whole idea of like the Judeo-Christian mythos versus Greek-Roman mythology fighting against each other over the dominion of humankind, that would be super cool. Alas, this is a dark romance book that was popular on TikTok. It's not going to be any more than what it is. Even with that, it's not as if we got any sex scenes. We only got that one wedding scene where all they use is hands and mouths. I've been suffering through this whole bookend for what? For oral. That's it. I've been blue-balled. If I feel like I have more to say during this editing process, I'll tack it on at the end. But for now, I've been filming for God knows how long, how many hours. I'm really tired of wearing this makeup, and I'm really happy that I did get to wear my laurel crown because I've had this for so long and I never had a chance to wear it until now. And I finally have a whiteboard. I didn't really get to use the whiteboard as much as I'd like, but I hope you learned something today at Grace's Fun Fact Greco-Roman Myth Corner. I'll see you when I see you. Bye for now. I'm Boo Boo the Fool. Hi, thank you so much for watching up until this point if you've made it this far. I'm here to give some of my concluding thoughts now that I spent like a week trying to edit this video. My friends came over and left me with some beautiful art. My concluding thoughts about Blood of Hercules. To be honest, I don't remember much of it now. I think it's probably my own trauma response trying to repress all these memories. But overall, I gave it a 1 star, and I will be honest, I do have a very small nugget of morbid curiosity for the next book in this series, Bonds of Hercules, coming out, I think, in October of this year, 2025. Most, like 99% of me thinks it's just going to be more of like the same as what we got here, maybe with more sex scenes, maybe Alexis is actually a little bit more of a badass, but I frankly don't know. It is going to be the Gladiator Games arc, but we'll see how that goes when we get there. My overall impressions of this book are, as I said throughout this whole video, is that there's a lot of nonsense, a lot of things not happening until the very end. Characters aren't very well developed. They do complete 180s towards the end of the book for no discernible reason as far as I can see. My one small nugget of hope is that Alexis turns into the Joker and absolutely decimates everybody, but I don't even know if that happens. To be honest, the more likely scenario is that Alexis ends up in some sort of polycule harem situation, which actually would be like a good for her moment, but I think I would be suffering through the whole thing. At the end of the day, I mean, I am pretty harsh in my video because I think I was coming up at like midnight when I was filming that. But to be honest, like part of me wants to be a little bit more gentle now, but part of me still wants to be very stern that like, look, you can like what you like, but you can like garbage and whatever. There's nothing I can do about that. But if I can talk to a couple of people about this, is that I want to go back to good books again, man. I want to go back to worlds where they're super detailed and engaging and fun and make sense, and you know, like there's so many different types of literature out there, and yes, sure, so what? It's subjective, like what you like, but then I'm tired of my brain rotting. I'm tired of letting myself go stupid, or I'm tired of being stupid. I want to be smart. I want to do research. I had a lot of fun doing research, even though it was started by whatever the hell Blood of Hercules decided to do. And also putting up here that if I get anything wrong about any details, especially regarding like trauma in childhood, adolescence, then feel free to put it so in the comments. Feel free to start a discussion in the comments. I know that in my To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods video, I got a couple of critiques about how I tried to explain misogyny, and so whatever I can learn from you guys is super highly appreciated. And with that, please subscribe if you want to see more of that, because To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods is coming out this year as well, book 2, which was renamed To Kill a Monstrous God, or To Kill Monstrous Gods, but it was changed from To Kill a Monstrous Prince, which means something's going on. We'll see where that goes. And of course, I'll probably do book 2 of this. So I can go down more Wikipedia rabbit holes. With that, have a happy new year. Have a wonderful 2025. Kiss your fan and friends goodnight, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. I missed you so much.